Let's get this meeting started. It is 6 p.m. Today is Tuesday, February 16, 2021. Time is 6 p.m. Item number one, call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Pledge of Allegiance and prayer. If you'd like to join us for the pledge. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then for the prayer, if you'd like to join, if I could ask you to please bow your head. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day. We ask that you look over these volunteers as they're in the field. Father, keep them safe. And on this commission, on this board tonight, please give us the discernment necessary to make the best choices for the ESD. Amen.
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 Item number two, the establishment of quorum. I have Commissioner Diaz, Commissioner Butler, Commissioner Santana, Commissioner Barnes, and Commissioner
Yes,
Alvarez.
sir.
Item number three, public comment must notify the board of speaking on certain agenda items. 5 minutes, public can comment by calling 915-213-3008. PIN code 346-413-140 pound. That's 915-213-3008. PIN code 346-314-140 pound. And I do believe that I have a couple of the chiefs here wanting to give public comment.
Okay.
The chief from Fabens is on the line.
Yes, sir. So I was calling in regards to item number 13, where it's talking about the low numbers and how to fix it and such, right?
Chief, I think you're listening to this to the meeting in two different locations and you're getting feedback.
I'm trying to do it on the phone. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
I'm going to mute all of you, and then you can unmute yourself. Go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to call about item 13. Do I start now or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I understand about this 97%.
Sorry to interrupt, but shouldn't we, if there's public comment is for any items that aren't on the agenda, correct?
Yeah, for anything, commissioners. And then if you have questions for them during the regular agenda, they can rejoin if you have questions for them. So a lot of them, they just want to voice their opinion, so that's when they do it.
Are you sure? I thought that if it was related to a specific agenda item that they should speak during that item.
Well, typically, even in the county, they do it, and then they get to be called back out if they have any questions. But you can wait if you like.
Chief Esparza, I thought the same thing too. If they want to speak, for example, on 13 or 12, I was going to ask to move it up after Ms. Ramos gave her, after item number 6. So I don't know if they want to do it now or if they want to wait, and I can ask for 13 and 12 to go after item number 6, because I would imagine we have a couple of people waiting to comment on that.
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Item number 6. Correction. Number 4. Discuss and approve the minutes of the special consent agenda. Number 4, number 5. Any questions on consent agenda, commissioners?
Move to approve
Do I have a second?
Chief,
Second.
sorry
I'm
to interrupt. I apologize. Is this so can we move items 13 and 12 to after item number 6 then? So we can have those people waiting be able to discuss on those issues?
Yes, I'll call it out for all you to take action after number 6.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for the interruption. Thank
No,
you.
that's okay. Do I have a second for consent agenda?
I second the hey, Roger, I'll second the motion to Commissioner Butler.
For which one, Commissioner?
I second Commissioner Butler's motion.
Okay. Commissioner Diaz? I think you said aye, right?
Aye.
Commissioner Butler?
Aye.
Commissioner Santana?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
And Commissioner Avalos?
Aye.
Motion carries. Regular agenda discussing on communications report by Elba Ramos.
Hi, hello, good evening, everyone. For the month
Hey,
of
good
January,
evening.
Clint had a total of 65 calls within their district, Fabens 147, Montana Vista 105, San Elizario 123, Socorro 213, and West Valley 136. For COVID calls for confirmed patients, there was a total of 8 in Clint, 9 in Fabens, 4 Montana Vista, 9 in San Elizario, 19 in Socorro, and 11 in West Valley. For fire marshal inspections, there was a total of 26. Permits paid for and issued, 27. For the no response not available, Clint had a total of 24 no response calls, Fabens 27, Montana Vista 0, San Elizario 10, Socorro 6, West Valley 0 with a total of 67 with all fire departments. Not available, there was 0 not available for Clint, 1 for Fabens, 0 for Montana Vista, 0 San Elizario, 9 for Socorro, 0 for West Valley, totaling to 10 not available calls. Are there any questions?
Negative.
Negative. Appreciate the update.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
No,
You're
go ahead.
welcome.
Thank you, Eva.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Ramos.
Thank you. You're welcome, sir.
Item number 6 for informational purposes only. Commissioner Commissioner Avalos would like to bring out item number 12 and 13 up to the front. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion. Second.
Item number 12, discussing action on all volunteer firefighters with a take-home vehicle must make 15% of the calls per month.
So, Chief, I don't know if anybody's going to comment on this. I don't know if they want to hear what I have to say first, or if they want to speak first. I don't know what the procedure should be there, but I don't know if they want to wait to see, or if you want them to speak first, Chief. How do we
However
usually?
you want to do it, Commissioner. This is your agenda item. We can do it however you please.
So I'm going to ask for those of you who are waiting to make a comment, if you can just hear me out, and then if you're more than welcome to comment after that, if you have every right to do so. So, commissioners, the reason why I brought this up, I want to begin by saying that for a fire departments like West Valley and East Montana, for Socorro, and even we look at the numbers now for Sanelli, I don't feel that this rule needs to be that they need to follow this. And here's a reason why. They're doing what they need to do. My concern for bringing this to our attention today is because of the number of drop calls that are happening, especially in Fabens and Clint. It's been going on for years. I've been on the board for 6 years now. And for 6 years, this has been a continual problem. And so I feel it's time we need to move on this. We're at 27 for Fabens. We're at 24 for Clint. And it's taken away from Socorro and Sanelli because Socorro and Sanelli are responding to a lot of those. So for a department like West Valley, a department like East Montana that have 100% calls, my intention tonight is not to intervene, or to try to micromanage the departments. This should not apply to them. And if passed, I have no intention of making this apply to them. They're doing what they need to do. My focus is on those departments where they have take-home vehicles and we're still dropping 27 and 24 calls. That's my concern. My concern is getting to the people who need it. We have long wait response times in Fabens. The last time there was a structural fire in Fabens, we had pumpers from outside of the Fabens station area. That type of stuff. So what I would like to propose tonight is and that's why 12 and 13 really go hand in hand, is that if they're not making a certain percentage of calls, they're not responding to a certain percentage, then we as the ESD need to enforce these rules, this 15% take-home rule. And here's how I'd like to do it. Here's my proposal to the board. I think we should give the chiefs at Clinton Fabens 1 month to meet with Roger and another commissioner, can be whichever would like, one of you would like to sit in on that meeting and hear that chief out. And they come in with a plan on how they're going to fix this. Now, before I move on, I do want to address a couple of things. We reached out to Chief Reyes through email, through phone call, and through text. Chief Reyes did not respond to any of those. We started reaching out in late December to Chief Reyes to meet with him, to ask him. That makes it well over 45 days. And 45, I understand he has a job and he has things to do, but 45 days of neither returning an email, returning a text, or returning a phone call. Nothing. And we wanted to meet with him before I brought this agenda item so we could see how we could help. How can we help you with your department? Secondly, to Chief Cordero's credit, he did meet with us on Teams. He met with us in very late December, and we had agreed that we would wait for an email from him so that he could tell us how we can help his department get better. That email never came. So we waited the entire month of January, and we are now in mid-February, and we still don't have a plan. And as I repeated earlier, it's 6 years of high drop calls with these two departments. We need to do something. And it's not a matter of micromanaging the departments. As I just said, my intention here is for the other departments to be left alone and continue to carry on the way that they're doing now. But it's for the residents of these communities. Because we're having people drive from Socorro, taking away from response times at Socorro down to Fabens. We're having people drive from Sanelli to Fabens and to also help out in Clint. And we need to fix that. We have to address that. So that is my proposal, commissioners, and anyone else who's listening on the call, is that West Valley, East Montana, that Sanelli and Socorro be left out of this. And I want to change it from 97% down to 93, because I think that's a fair, we have to look at the volume of calls that Socorro attends to. Not only their own calls, but here recently, calls down in Fabens and Clint. And I think that's fair. I think we give them a month, they come in. If they don't meet in a month, then we take action. We're giving them 30 days to meet with Roger and another commissioner. I would like another commissioner to be present there. Then every you give them 2 full quarters to fix the numbers. You give them 6 months to turn that ship around with our help. I think that is a good amount of time. It's a fair amount of time. We will be providing help if they allow us to. We're not, so after the 2 quarters, if they cannot hit those numbers, if they're still not doing being able to do what they need to do, then at that point, I would also like to propose for this agenda item that we have the power to ask that chief to step down. Because at that point, we cannot blame all the volunteers there. We have to look at leadership. So I think it's a solid plan. It's 7 months total that they have to turn things around with offered help, with our help. So if any chiefs would like to respond, or commissioners, if you have any questions or any thoughts, please let me know. But that's why I wanted to address this tonight. I mean, we look at the numbers, it's a continual thing, and we don't want to remove them tonight. But if we ask questions, they have to respond to the board. You know, we ask them, hey, you mean 3 different forms of communication and nothing in a month and a half, maybe it's close to 2 months now. You know, in any other setting, that would be a huge issue. And so, and even then, we're still going to give them 30 days. Come with a plan. Come meet with Roger. Sit down with us. How are we going to turn this thing around? How can we help you guys? So that's
Hey,
what I'm
Commissioner.
proposing tonight.
Hey, Commissioner Avalos, I'll be glad to assist you. If you're on that team, I'd be glad to assist you with that. My only comment or thought is 14 days is too long. All right, that's a better response than some of the fires are going to. So I think we need to, or 30 days, I think it was. I think we should narrow it down a little bit on that, and still give them time to react, but time to respond to a commissioner, to Roger or anyone else. 30 days is unacceptable. I
Okay.
think 72
Yes, sir.
hours is more. I think 72 hours is more acceptable, even with a job. We all have jobs. Guess what? We're all here tonight, taking time away from our family, our friends, our jobs, to make sure we provide our county with the very, very best. So I'd be glad to sit on that with you if you're a part of that, or whomever is.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnes. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Avalos.
Oh,
Sorry,
Yes,
go
sir.
ahead.
no,
Go ahead.
you go ahead. Fine.
Commissioner Avalos, I know that when you met with the chief from Clint, I know that he's not structured yet in having enough people around him, assistance. Did he give any information to why he's not doing that? Why he hasn't filled those positions?
Yes, sir, he did. And Chief Esparza was also on that phone call. And
Okay.
so his explanation was that he did not have enough firefighters that were certified to meet an officer status. And that's when we asked him to send us the names of those firefighters. And Roger said, that way we can begin the process to make sure that they are certified. So
Right.
then you can, have a chain of command.
Right.
Yes, sir. So yes, the help was offered, sir. That's what he told us.
Okay.
But we have yet to receive that email or text or a phone call since that time that we asked, how can we help you? How do we move forward to that? And again, that's one of the reasons why I brought this forward today. I waited the entire month of January to see if these chiefs would sit with us or give us a plan before bringing this to you guys.
Okay.
Commissioners, right quick, for everybody that's currently on the phone, it's *6 to unmute yourself when you need to speak.
Commissioner Avalos, thanks for the explanation. I guess one of the questions I have is about the take-home vehicle. So can you explain a little bit about how the take-home, changing this policy on the call volume for take-home vehicles is related to the dropped calls, and how you think that's going to improve things?
Absolutely. So when we ran take-home vehicle numbers, Chief Esparza and I, for example, we ran them the day that we actually called Chief Reyes to see if he would respond to us, and he didn't. We ran some numbers, and Chief Esparza also has some numbers to provide for you guys. And what we saw was that there was a lot of vehicles that were stalled for 30 days. So we had one vehicle that had not moved for 30 days. We had other vehicles that hadn't moved for weeks at a time. Because of we were able to track them through GPS. We had vehicles where we saw a constant kind of route to work, which is fine. We understand. And I understand that they're volunteers and they're giving up that time. But having those vehicles is also, that's also something that comes with, it's like a sense of duty. Like if you have that vehicle, you're to respond. So one of the reasons why I want to change that policy, Commissioner Butler, is that if we have a vehicle that's sitting there for 30 days, but we have other firefighters that could potentially be using that vehicle, even if let's say that firefighter is injured or is not able to perform his or her duties at that time. Well, there are other firefighters that can be driving that vehicle, that can be serving the public. If we have people that are not responding for 3 days and we're missing drop calls, but that vehicle is just parked at their house, then let's either respond to the calls or leave that vehicle at the station, or let's come up with a policy to where someone who is going to be able to respond that day or who is willing to respond that day will respond. And so if you give me a few seconds, I can read some of those numbers for you. So that way, and Chief Esparza, if you have some, if you could please also let them know. So for example,
So out of the list, Commissioner, let me chime in on that. Out of the list, there was 2 vehicles that we detected they were parked for long periods of time. As a matter of fact, this afternoon, we took a look at one for Socorro, which then indicated that the vehicle was parked for 112 days. Well, the GPS was stuck on the 112 days, but that vehicle had been making calls. We
Right.
confirmed it this afternoon. So I want to make it clear that Socorro and West Valley has a vehicle that got stuck also at the same location, but that vehicle is moving and is making some of the calls. So, but all the other GPSs are working fine in accordance to what we, the information you requested.
Thank you, Chief. So for example, Commissioner Butler, on January 16th, when we ran the report, Rescue 211 from Clint had not moved in 23 days. Rescue 202 had not moved in 6 days. Rescue 204 had not moved in 11 days. Now, granted, Rescue 211 belongs to a firefighter who was injured. And I understand, obviously they're injured. We want them and they need to get healthy. But Commissioner Butler, at that point, someone else could have used that vehicle to respond to calls. And we know they're missing calls. The numbers don't lie, right? So my point is that if vehicles are just sitting there, or if we have people who are driving vehicles in these departments and they're not responding to calls, and we continue to see drop calls, then we need to change that policy. That's why I don't want to mess with West Valley or East Montana or Sonelli or Socorro, because they are responding. And whether we like how they run their take-home policy or not, they're doing their job effectively. So my only concern is, obviously here with these 2 departments, they need help. They're at a point now where I think we can say we need to provide assistance, because we can't have 20 plus drop calls. And it's just, we can't, right? We're risking those people who are calling for that help. And so that's my concern. I don't know if that answered your question, Commissioner Butler.
Well, I'm thinking, so we heard last time we brought this up, we had a discussion about it, a robust discussion. And I remember at least Montana Vista and West Valley opposing this kind of policy for the take-home vehicles. And we did implement some guidelines, right, on who could take home vehicles, what kinds of positions they needed to be in, or what kind of certifications they needed. So 2 things. I'm wondering if Montana Vista and West Valley, and even Socorro, who consistently perform really well, don't need a take-home vehicle policy in order to be effective. Then why do we think that implementing a take-home vehicle policy will enhance effectiveness to the other? Is it a success factor or not, right? Is it something else? Is it that these stations that are not performing well maybe don't have the leadership necessary to properly utilize those resources, right? Maybe they don't have enough people that qualify under our guidelines to drive the vehicles. Maybe it's something else, is what I'm trying to say. If the other stations can perform well without a take-home vehicle policy, a strict one, then why do we think that's the factor that's gonna make a difference for the other stations? So yeah, if you look at best practices, is that one that will make a difference?
Okay, so let me go ahead and respond to that. So with regards to that, right, it's not that they don't have a take-home policy. They have their own, right, policy. Whether we agree with whether they should be responding to 15% calls or not, it's at this point, it really doesn't affect them, because this agenda item, because they are doing what they need to do, right? They're going to be exempt, or not have to follow this guideline. But here's the thing: I understand what you're saying, but at this point, what else do we do, Commissioner Butler? I mean, you're lucky enough to live in an area where you have 100% response. Fabens had 81% last month. And so if we don't do something, we have vehicles that are sitting there. We have vehicles that they're taking to work. That's not an issue. So if they're taking the vehicles to work and they have vehicles that are sitting there, why do we have 27 missed calls? And so, yes, maybe it is a leadership thing. And we hope that Chief Reyes in the next 3 days will sit down with Roger and one of us and explain, this is what's happening. Here's where I need help. But my thing is that because of the situation that these departments find themselves in right now, Commissioner Butler, we need to provide some structure on who has take home and when they're going to respond or what percentages they should be responding to, which is exactly why West Valley and East Montana are not being included in this, or Socorro, because they are responding. They are getting out there. They are doing what they need to do. My only concern is to get these numbers right. Now, Commissioner Butler, if in 6 months they turn ship around, you know what? Okay, let them go back to their own policy and let them decide what's best for them. But in the meanwhile, Commissioner, we need to do something. That number, 81% response, that's, I mean, that somebody's got to give with that number. So something has to improve there. And so I think that by being able, this board telling them, for the meanwhile, until the numbers come up, this is the people who have take-home vehicles, they have to respond. And if they're not responding, and there is someone in your department who is willing to respond, maybe that person should have the truck. Maybe if that person's working, leave the truck at the station, and whoever's there who can drive it can respond to the calls. And after 6 months, Commissioner, if we all hope that those numbers improve, then they can go back to the policy that they see fit to them. But to me, this is a temporary policy, Commissioner Butler, and it's just to provide some sort of structure. And you're right, ma'am, I completely agree with you. It starts at leadership. And that's why I'm hoping, and it's unfortunate that it had to come to an agenda item, that the chiefs will sit down and tell us, this is what's happening. Here's where I need the help. Here's what we need to do. But I think we have to implement something in the meanwhile to provide some sort of structure to get some response time going, and while these issues are being attended to. So that would be my response, Commissioner Butler.
Hey, Rick.
Okay, I think.
Commissioner Avalos, I'm sorry. Hey,
Go ahead.
my only thought is whatever's good for, I don't want to say the goose has to be good for the get, but it has to be fair and equitable across the boards. Anytime you split this up like this, you're imposing punishment. You're saying, one party doesn't have to do this, but the other party does. I'm not saying we shouldn't look at this, but I think the standard for the process or for the issuance of vehicles has to be fair and equitable across the board. I got it. Some are responding. I think Roger, there's no other way but playing Big Brother. When those calls are happening, where's the GPS place that vehicle? If it's at the residence or at the place of work, I agree that is a concern. And I agree with this is a concern. But, for me at my work, my vehicle has the lowest miles of all, and no one hardly drives it. But I think someone mentioned earlier, that comes with position too, for some of these. But I think it does need to be looked at, and we should provide a fair and equitable for all stations. And if they're doing it right, they're going to continue to do it right. And if there's some challenges the chiefs are meeting or those with vehicles are meeting, they're gonna see the woes of the ways, and I think it's going to be self fixing as far as once the standards are established. I agree we should get HR involved in making sure they look at the policy that we put out to ensure it's fair and equitable. So we're not targeting, or we're not looks like we're going after a station who's not meeting the standards, and bring them all up together. So that's just my thought on it.
Okay, can I mention something?
I think that's Chief Calzada from Fabens, and I do have Chief Cordero on the line also.
If you guys don't mind, okay, so my name is David Calzada. I'm over here at Fabens Fire Department. I pretty much handle everything as far as the numbers, responses, and such like that. When you guys are coming up with 81%, there's an important thing that you guys didn't realize is that if you want to write this down, from December 8th to January 18th, we had no paid personnel from 6 to 3 p.m. So during that time, that's 29 shifts that we had no paid staff from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. as compared to the other departments who've always had their paid staff. So up until before this whole COVID thing, my numbers are showing that we've been in the 90s. March of 2020 was 90%, or 97, sorry. April, 91%, May, 97%. It was only up until recently when COVID kicked up and the paid staff started taking a hit with COVID that all of a sudden you start seeing our numbers drop. And that's really simple because every time that there's a shortage in personnel, the paid staff that we have either gets moved over to Sinelli or Clint. We're always the first department to lose the paid staff when there's a personnel shortage. So it's not just from the December 8th to the January 18th that we've had, no paid staff during 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., but it's happened multiple times in the past, and it reflects on our numbers. So from December 8th to January 18th, that's a total of 29 shifts. During those 29 shifts, there's been a total of 43 calls that have come within that time frame. If you look at our past, and I wish I can email you the numbers. We've always been in the 90s. And at the very least, we'd go down to about 89, 85 at the very least. But unfortunately, these past couple of months, we just didn't have the paid staff on file or on staff.
Commissioner,
So that's
the
reason why some of our numbers have gone down. Is because of that reason. So we've had a total of 11 shifts in December with no paid staff, and that was one of our busiest months. And then in the month of January, we had 18 shifts without paid staff.
Commissioner, just to be clear, even if there's no paid staff, the fire marshals are also picking up the calls there, and also the other stations that do have the paid staff are picking up the calls. So at no time that a call during the 6 to 3 time schedule go unanswered for Fabens.
Right. And it's true. We do have people that cover, but the bad part about it, without that paid staff, it makes our numbers go down. Now, if you take out all that time frame, the calls that came out during that time frame, we would be at the 90%. But it's those missed calls during that time frame that we lost that make our numbers go down. I handle shifts. So we've always had somebody on shift. Every now and then we might have a small time frame where we don't have somebody. And that's usually between 3 a.m. to maybe 6 a.m. And that's because our personnel are getting ready for work and don't want to get stuck in the call that's going to last a few hours and then show up late to work. So that's a small time frame where we do have issues. But when it comes to numbers, that's where the majority of our problem is the missed I guess you could say the shifts without the paid staff. And those are our busiest numbers. If you remember when you guys set up the time frames for paid staff, it was based on our busiest time frame. Well, 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. is our busiest time frame, and that's where you have all our missed calls at. And if you'd like, I can sit down with any one of y'all and show you, if you subtract those missed calls, we're going to be above the 90%. And I apologize that Chief Reyes wasn't able to make it. I know he's been pulled between 2 different jobs, and he's got his family and all. And I apologize, but if he's not available, you can reach me. I'm the one that handles all the numbers and the shifts.
Chief, do you have any comment on the take-home vehicle item?
With that one, I lean both ways. With the guys that we have that have take-homes, they have no issues with hitting the 15%. In fact, our guys with the take-homes have anywhere from 20 to 30% response rate. What one of my issues is, I know we have a rule where you have to have some sort of a certification to have a take-home with you. We do have some guys that are responding like crazy. They put in ridiculous amounts of hours, but the only problem that we're having is that they're still in the works of trying to get their certifications, so they can't take a take-home vehicle with them. I know there's a couple of guys that don't have certs right now that still respond, and if I give them a take-home vehicle, our numbers will probably reach 100%, but unfortunately, we do have rules that don't allow that. And that's just strictly, I think the take-home is an incentive for them to get their certification.
So I want to respond to that, and Chief Gonzalez, if I'm mistaken, correct me, and Chief Esparza, if I'm mistaken, correct me. The reason why we passed that rule was because at the time when we passed that rule, and it was in 2015 when we did that, Chief Reyes had an assistant chief who was not medical and not fire, right. And he was the assistant chief, and he had a take-home vehicle. and his numbers were nowhere near 15%. They were single digit. And the reason why we passed that rule was because we had firefighters in Fabens that brought that to our attention who were medical or fire or were medical and fire and did not have a take-home vehicle. That's why that rule was implemented. So I don't want you to think that it was just for those commissioners who were not there when that happened. This wasn't some arbitrary rule that we came up with or a way to get back in anybody. It was a structured rule because at the time we had a firefighter who was the assistant chief at the time, who was not medical, who was not fire, and there were firefighters who were medical and fire or medical or fire who did not have a take-home vehicle, who wanted to be responding to calls. So that's why we implemented that rule. That's the first one.
No, I believe you. And the things ever since then, we did make a lot of changes because I believe that's the time when Chief Reyes finally, when he became chief. So there was a lot of restructuring that we did around that time. But honestly, just all this talk that you guys were doing about 81%, that was nothing that we can control. That's just COVID taking the paid personnel out of our station. And that's the bad part, is that we're one of the busiest stations. We're always either second or third with the highest call volume. But unfortunately, when there's a personnel shortage, usually our personnel, paid staff, are pulled out of our station and moved to different areas. So, I mean, of course, it's going to look worse on us because of the fact that, well, if we're running 150 calls and that time frame, our numbers are going to be ridiculous because it's the number of calls that we miss, you know. So 27, you know, it's a lot. But if you think about how many were missed because of that time frame, you know, we'd definitely be over the 90%.
Chief Esparza, is Chief Cansada correct in saying that we as the ESD, you can confirm or give us an explanation that we're dropping the ball, we're not responding to calls in Fabens from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m.?
No, sir.
To reflect that?
No, sir. All calls have been answered in Fabens during the time of 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. At no time do calls go unanswered. It doesn't matter which of the paid staff is answering. And for most part, if a fire marshal picks up the call, it's being logged in as a Fabens call. So even if we're here and there's a call and nobody's responding, we're picking up those calls. The reason that it's mostly Fabens that gets picked up because it's the furthest district, and our staff there is averaging 1 to maybe 2 calls a day. Of course, they've had days where they've run 5, but their average is 1 to 2 calls a day, on average. And they're the furthest district away, so we put them in the middle where it's Clint that can back up Socorro and Sanelli and vice versa, and it's not the far of the drive to go straight across 2 districts to get to Socorro for a structure fire. But nonetheless, every call from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. is being answered in Fabens, Monday through Friday.
I have to actually disagree with that because I'm looking at my calls right now, and if you're okay, of the 27 calls that it's showing that we missed in the month of January, of those 27, I would have to say maybe outside of the 6 to 3 a.m. time frame, I'm looking at maybe 14 calls outside of that time frame. So the numbers aren't adding up as to like what Chief Esparza is saying. I'm showing, because I'm looking at the list right now. I'm looking at all the missed calls that I have on file because I keep track every single day. They're not getting logged in that way. Maybe if Clint or Sanelli responds, then I think that's where it shows us as a missed call during that time frame. But I don't know if Elva can clarify with dispatch to see if that's true, because I'm not showing those numbers coinciding. I'm still showing a good number of missed calls during that time frame coinciding with our missed calls.
Again, commissioners, the calls are being picked up, and yes, if it's one of the crews that's picking up from Sanelli or Clint, it is being logged in as Sanelli or Clint. But if our fire marshal's picking it up, it's being logged in as Fabens.
Okay. Right. So, I mean, like I said, I mean, I would love to sit down with any one of the board members and show you how we run things here. And then I really want to have a meeting with you guys to show exactly how we run things. Because up until, like I said, if you look at our past numbers, previous months before this whole COVID spike back in May and June before then, we've always been in the low 90s, always. That's never been an issue. And ever since then, we've we did lose three medical personnel, which is a really big hit. We picked up 2 recently last month. And then we have another 4 that want to sign up for the EMT program in the summer. So we do have a plan to always try to keep people certified in medical and keep these calls going. And then we do have shifts. Every night we do have people on staff that I make sure are here and responding. It just, unfortunately, if you look at the numbers, the numbers throw it off compared to what you're actually seeing here in station. But I mean, if you want to get a hold of me, like I said, I mean, we can sit down. I know Chief Reyes is sometimes a hard person to get a hold of because of his work schedule. He's working 2 jobs. I work 2 jobs as well. But I mean, I can try to set something up with you guys.
Commissioner Butler has a question.
Yeah. So thank you, Chief, for your input. I think, we love to hear more from the chiefs when we talk about these issues. I think it's really helpful for us to bring some perspective. But one of the things you mentioned has me thinking, like, and maybe this is a question for Chief Esparza. So we move paid staff around based on needs or shortages, right? And so it seems to me like we have a network, right? We have this network of paid staff and we place them at different stations, all with the same responsibility of responding to calls, right? So if Fabens has dropped calls, that's what the backup is for in Sanelli or Clicked or Socorro, right? So it's a network that's working, maybe not optimally at each individual station, but there's always somebody responding. So I feel like we need more robust data here. Like we need to understand how this network works, what the consequences are. So what is the difference in response time if somebody at Fabens doesn't respond, but somebody in Sanelli responds to Fabens, right? So what are we actually talking about here in terms of impact and consequences? Because if the network of stations and volunteers and paid staff is working, but it's reflecting negatively on individual stations, then we need better clarity on that, I think.
I think, Commissioner, to answer your question, and that's a report that I can run in the next couple of days and have it emailed to you both, all of you. It's not really the lost calls for Fabens. I'm going to speak on behalf of Fabens right now, from 6 to 3. Because every call from 6 to 3, no matter which one of the paid staff, it's getting answered. I think the majority of the problem that we're having, is even Sanelli has voiced their concern, is after 3 to 6 a.m. when the staff comes back, where the volunteers are not responding to calls, even though that they're there. That's the current going from Sanelli. They're there, but they're not responding. They're in the area with the trucks, but they're not responding. So I've had Chief Treviso voice his opinion that he's running from Sanelli, which is all the way to Tornillo, 15-20-minute drive to get to a call that by the time he gets there, he's being canceled because it's already too late.
Right, and I think that applies to all the departments. So because we've responded to other districts at that same time frame. What it is that it's all dependent on work schedules. Because I'll give you an example. I go in, I got to be out of my house by 6 a.m. en route to work. So from 3 o'clock on, if I get stuck on a CPR call, that's automatically 2.5 hour call right there. So I would not be able to make it. So of course, yeah, 3 to 6 is going to be one of those issues. And that's how I mentioned earlier. 3 to 6 is one of our biggest issues because people don't want to get stuck on some long MVA that's going to take 2 to 3 hours, because we see these calls. We see calls that last 3, 4, sometimes 5 hours. So at 3 a.m., we're pushing the envelope if we go to a call. I mean, I've personally gone to work super late because I went to a call that came in as something standard like an abdominal pain, and it turned into a CPR that lasted 2 hours, and then I showed up to work about half an hour, 45 minutes late. So a lot of people are kind of a little touch and go on 3 to 6. But I understand Chief Reviso made that thing. But I mean, also in return, we've also responded to other districts during that time frame as well. If I was off, or some of these members are off between 3 and 6, yeah, they'll respond. So I mean, I think it's one that they've responded to us, we've responded to their district, we responded to other districts. So it's hand in hand, Well, Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, Chief, you're the only one talking.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing is, I mean, if you come into numbers, yeah, that's the issue. Is just 3 to 6 a.m. has always been our trouble time, but also our 81% is just due to the other departments having to respond during that paid personnel time. So I just wanted to clarify with you guys exactly why it's low. But please, if you guys go back to the previous reports, go back to May, April, March of last year, we've always been above 90%.
I'm actually going to correct Chief Calzada. Fabens is actually covered from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. because the paid staff from Clint is also picking up the slack because they get off at 6 p.m. So they're responding all the way to Fabens till 6 p.m. From 6 to 6, the paid staff is responding to all calls. It doesn't matter which truck is going. It's the paid staff covering those calls.
And I'd like
if
to.
for any reason Fabens doesn't pick up, Clint is picking up the call.
Thank you, Chief. The other thing I'd like to add too, yes, your numbers improved right before COVID. That's absolutely true, Chief Gonzalez, because I remember complimenting you guys for 3 or 4 months continuously on the board about how great your numbers were looking. But prior to that, those numbers were they were in the 80s. And so, and I'm glad that you're here, Chief Gonzalez, and I'm glad that you're reaching out to us because we waited 40 plus days and we tried communicating through text with Chief Reyes, and apparently he was too busy to return a text. So I'm more than happy to sit down with you, but also Chief Reyes, Chief Gonzalez, if Chief Reyes is the man in charge of Fabens, he needs to be part of this as well. I understand that you carry a lot of the weight, and I appreciate you, and yes, we are going to meet with you, but he needs to be present, sir, because if he's the head chief, like I said, a lot of what you're giving us, we could have had that meeting and we could have discussed it there. That was the whole reason why we tried reaching out to you all, was to figure this stuff out before it came to this. So yes, we'd love to meet with you, but I don't know how the rest of you feel, commissioners, but Chief Reyes needs to be there as well, because if he's the man in charge of the station, we need his input as well, sir. So
well, that's why he has an assistant chief to help him out when he can't be there, and that's exactly what Chief Gonzalez is doing right now. And thank you, sir. Thank you, Chief.
No problem. And
before we move forward, though, we need to compare these numbers and make sure what the discrepancy is. I mean, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and it should be easy to compare these numbers. It should be easy to figure out what the discrepancies are and start moving forward. And yeah, take-home vehicles, they're tools. And redistributing the tools is a good way to probably improve the calls. But I think first and foremost is just compare these numbers, just for everybody to be sure.
And if I can say just last thing before I let you guys go, and this goes across the whole district. When COVID hit, that was really difficult because you've seen it on the news. Healthcare workers are tired and strained. A lot of our medical personnel have gone weeks without any time off. I personally have gone 28 days without a day off. So we're getting stretched thin as well. I think if you guys want to up the percentage, I think outside of the COVID pandemic would be a lot easier. The thing is that right now is that a lot of our guys work for EMS. They work for hospitals. El Paso Fire for a while wasn't allowing any of their personnel to work any second jobs or volunteer. And so we lost a couple of our guys during that time frame. We do have about maybe 10 medical personnel. Of those 10, 8 of them caught COVID on these calls. So that's 2 weeks off for each person automatically that they can't come back to station. And then plus you also do have the fear factor. Dispatch does a great job letting us know when there's patients with COVID. Some have slipped through the cracks, and it's not their fault. It's the fault of the 911 callers not telling them the truth of what's going on. So I've gone to calls that were simple toe pains, head pains, no symptoms of COVID, but show up and it turns out it's a household of COVID people. So a lot of people have become very worried about going to these calls, getting it on themselves and bringing it back to their residences, to their wives, their kids. So, I mean, that's that's a really big deal, and that's one of the issues that have come over here. Some of our top responders have gotten a reduction in number of calls for that reason, and it's just COVID. COVID is COVID. It's bad off. I've lost 2 people that I know. People are losing them all over the place, and I think that's one of the things district wide is that you're going to see a reduction in personnel responding because of that reason. We're working a lot more. We're stretched thin. We're exhausted, and we're scared. And I just wanted to throw that out there because I think it affects everybody. But I do want to thank you all for your time, though.
I believe Chief Cordero is also on the line.
Hello, good evening, commissioners. I hope everybody's doing good and staying warm. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. No, so I just wanted to put in my input or my 2 cents in this. I did meet with Esparza, and I did meet with the Commissioner Avalos, and we had a long discussion over a lot of the points that Mr. Avalos brought up. Just one of the things that I do want to bring up is, do we all know what the definition of volunteer is and how it relates to all these guys? So I'm gonna read it by verbatim, and this is just a person who freely offers to take part in an enterprise or undertake a task. Okay, and with that said, it's very difficult, and it's like I told them during the meeting that, in my sense, is I don't have medical personnel. Yes, he did offer to bring some people that he knows. He goes to high school students from the high school to bring them over to volunteer. And I told him that that's great. The only big downfall on my side is that my medical personnel. Right now I have, and this is just numbers. All right. Right now, out of 5 medical personnel, it's myself, Mrs. Gutierrez, Mr. Alvarado, Mrs. Garibay, and I have another gentleman, Mr. Rudy Sanchez. All right, I have 5 medics. Out of those 5 medics, 2 of them are taking their advanced class. So they're out Monday and Fridays and Saturdays. All right. Mrs. Garibay, she's on a medical leave, right? So that leaves 2 medics, which is myself and Mr. Sanchez. Mr. Sanchez works out of town for Midland Fire, so he comes in 4 days and then leaves back up. So that leaves only me. And that's the biggest thing that I do agree with Chief Calzada is that, sometimes we're being stretched to the abnormal. And I'll be honest with you, some of these guys, they've told me straight out, you know what, Chief, I'm just tired. I need a day off. And I tell them, take a day off. All right. We try to, well, at least I try to mitigate most of the time and stretch myself out as much as I can. Like, for example, last night, it was cold. I didn't have no medics, and I ran calls. I haven't had a day off since I took over as a chief again, and like I said, it's not a complaining matter. It's not, but you have to guys understand at the same time is that I cannot force these guys to tell them you have to run 93%, you have to run 96%, and at the top of at the end of the runway is that some of these calls, and I do have to agree, there's peaks and flows where you might not have. I've had people on shift on Saturday night, there's no calls. But the moment that they leave to go home after their shift, guess what? We get slammed with 5 calls, 6 calls. And by that time, either we're at home, we're at our jobs, and we can't make those. So, and I understand where you guys are coming, you're concerned for the community. I have family members that live in Socorro, San Eli, and in Fabians. So I worry about that. But at the same time, like I said, it's very hard for somebody that volunteers their time to make them, enforce them to go into, well, you have to run 93%. Because my outcome, honestly, it would be like, you know what, Chief, you're crazy. I'm not where's my family? Where's my spare time? I do this, and then, like I said, I started 13 years ago. And, it was on a volunteer basis whenever you have time to give the fire department. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys have any questions about that. I also have input on the take-home vehicles. I was never reached out to ask about these vehicles. I believe, we kind of ran into the situation, me and Esparza, but as far as Rescue 211, it was picked up. She's on medical leave. Rescue 202, it was parked, but he actually told me, hey, Chief, I need some days. So that's why the vehicle was never moved. But if you look at it now, it's back up and running. Rescue 204 is my floater truck. And usually the Rescue 204 is being used by the medic that comes from Midland. So, like I said, some of these vehicles, are being used. It's just not as much as I guess you guys would want to. At the same time, we're talking about the 15%. Some of these individuals that that can probably use these vehicles, and I'll be honest with you, they live out of district. I have a guy that lives all the way in Isleta. I have a guy that lives in Horizon. So I don't think it would be feasible for them to have a take-home vehicle to come and run from all the way from Isleta or from Horizon to Con Clint or Con Sanelli or Fayetteville and Socorro. Because we're defeating the purpose of response time. So, I don't know if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, Chief Cordero, if someone is off, that they asked you for days off, and there's someone at the station, why not ask that person to take their truck to the station so that the people who are qualified to drive the truck can take it from the station to respond to calls? Why does someone with a day off need to hold on to the vehicle? Help me understand that, because the way I see it is that they're tools, right? They're tools, but if those tools are not being utilized and that person rightfully so has asked for time off, right? Why is he or she holding on to that vehicle when that vehicle could be utilized by someone else who is able to drive a vehicle? That's what I don't understand, and I don't understand what the resistance is to that idea.
And there's no resistance. But at the same time, I do. So basically, my station of response, where my all the people respond out of, is going to be Station 1. In Station 1, there's two vehicles there. There's Rescue 207 and there's Rescue 204 that's in the back. So those two vehicles had all, and you can ask any of my members. I have told them, if you guys are going to be on call, just let me know, and you guys can use that truck because those are our floaters. So, like I said, with me being a small department, I can absolutely tell them, park the truck, but it's just going to sit there because Rescue 207 and Rescue 204, which are at the station, can be utilized. And like I said, and that's the answer to that question.
Hey, Chief, this is Commissioner Barnes. I want to thank you for providing that information. And I think as your voice was heard today, that voice needs to continue to be heard as we look at the processes that we have and how we can improve them, and then be an enabler on our end to help and assist all chiefs and better looking at this program. So your voice was definitely heard tonight. Both your chiefs were, and I thank you for it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Commissioners, any other questions?
No, sir. I also want to say thank you to the volunteer departments. Thank you, Chief Cordero, also. I know you guys work really hard. And, making these rules, making these plans, trying to figure out how to make things better for the community. I'm throwing myself just thinking about that because I know what you guys go through. And it's not easy. But thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
So what do we do with this now? Do we?
Well, we're on agenda 12. Chief Esparza, you want to add anything or make any comments regarding Chief Cordero?
With everything that we've looked at, Commissioners, and the documentation that Ms. Butler wants, I think that for you all to make the decision based on what the chiefs are saying, I think it's best to run a report only from the time where the paid staff is going out. I think that we should be calling it good when the paid staff is handling the call. It doesn't matter which station's there because that's what they're there to do, to run on all these calls. We're representing the district that's going to all these calls. It doesn't matter if it's Fabens, Clint, San Isario, Tornillo, whatever they call it. One of the things that we have discussed with Chief Cordero, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, is the fact that it doesn't matter that you're going to have some individual have a car for 1 or 2 days if they're taking a day off, okay? If the cars are there, I'll be honest with you. Out of Clint, Clint used to be, when I took over, they had 15 members with 18 take-home vehicles. And the
That is
same
true.
thing
That
was
is very
happening.
true.
So we have since lowered the number of vehicles that the department has, yet we still see the same problem. Now, I think one of the things that we do need to address, because it's happening and it even happens with the constituents that are looking at this on a daily basis. If one of our vehicles is parked at somebody's house when they're out on vacation for 1 or 2 weeks, our vehicles, I think, should be parked at our stations because nobody can question that our vehicles are parked at our stations. But when you as a taxpayer are looking at one of our vehicles being sitting there 2 or 3 weeks, then it's a cause for concern, especially because we've had some complaints that the call was right across the street and this vehicle never moved in 2 weeks. Then that's the cause for concern. 1 or 2 days, I don't think should be the cause for concern because, of course, we even take time off. I have a take-home unit, but I also, if you call me and you need me, I'm coming out on that particular day or whatever. But if we're gonna be going out on a week vacation, the nearest fire station you can park it that belongs to ESD2. That way, nobody can question why that vehicle's been sitting there for 2, 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. I mean, and I do have that policy where, if they're going to be out for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even people that have requested leave, they do park the vehicle and they clean it, they wash it, they clean the inside, and they leave it ready to be used by somebody else.
One of the things that Mr. Avalos did come to the office and we went over, he wanted a report of the GPS, is like he said, we did run, the GPS will tell you how long the vehicle's been sitting there. We had vehicles that have been sitting there 10 days, 12 days, 15 days at the single location. Again, I had one this morning and I saw the report and I called them up, they brought it. There was a malfunction with the GPS, but the vehicle had been moving. But all the rest, the vehicles are moving because I see them turning on when we've run a report, when somebody requests a report. The problem is not just necessarily going on the calls, is if you're going on a call and the amount of time that the time the vehicle's been sitting there, because we have had those calls. I've seen this vehicle parked here for the last 2 weeks. And I think that's one of the concerns that Mr. Avalos was trying to address also. As far as the response time, we are looking into doing a recruitment, not a seminar, to try to entice some of these kids. We're trying to figure out how to do it. We are our new logistics truck, I'm looking at a billboard to represent ESD2 in all our 6 departments that are currently doing recruiting of volunteers. We do need to bring some more in. I had one of the assistant chiefs give me a great idea, which we had already been looking into it. He would like to see a website with recruitment through the ESD, where they apply through the ESD directly, and we send them to the departments that they're closest to. But it's through the ESD. So I mean, they're shooting ideas around, and that's what we're looking to do. But it's only going to change if the chiefs are putting a little bit of effort into it to try to recruit some people. We could, at the district level, we can try to recruit, but if we send people over there and they're not accepted or they're not putting the effort into it, then it's not going to work out.
And just comment with that right quick, is, what we do have to understand also is these members that are coming in, it's I love the idea, that we can bring people in. But the biggest thing that we heard, and I think that all chiefs can agree with, is the medical personnel, because 90% of these calls are medical. So and that's where, like I said, we stay on top of it, try to recruit people. But what good does it do to me, right, to have somebody that is freshly out of school coming in, fire certifications, and like I said, it's good, but at the end of the day, I'm still falling one inch short because they're not medically certified. Does that make sense? And like I said, it kind of hurts us because at the end of the day, we need a medic to go to these calls.
Just to touch base on that, Chief, remember Mr. Avalos did want to recommend some high school students that they are going through the EMT class as we speak. They're about to graduate this year with their EMT, and they're a potential candidate for us. So Socorro High School's putting out 20 EMTs, and they can get some experience here and a benefit. I think they're more inclined to come and volunteer for us, but we do have to dedicate a little bit of time to them to make them feel that this is where they should belong. And I think that's part of the procedure.
Not only Socorro, Del Valle and Mountain View as well. So there's 3 schools in our area that are producing EMT kids. And then, Chief Cordero, I know you responded to us, sir, and I appreciate you meeting with us, but that's why we wanted this email, sir. Again, the same thing that I told Chief Cansada. I realize you gentlemen are busy, we've got a lot going on, but that's why we had wanted this email, so we could avoid this or try to work with this, to see, okay, what are your needs? Give us your needs. That's why we asked you. Tell us what you need, so we on the ESD side can get things going for you, right? That's why we wanted to know this stuff, and that was the urgency to meet with the Fabens leadership as well. Was what do you need? How can we help you? Because we don't want you guys, obviously there's a struggle to meet numbers. There's a struggle to meet calls. That no one can say that's not true. The numbers don't lie. Numbers are what they are.
No,
that's the beauty of numbers, right? Right, sir. But so
now
what
my
I would like for
this is sorry. My thing with
go
this
ahead.
is that like I said, some of the times that we have these volunteers, we try to do all these for the volunteers, but at the same time is we have to understand that I cannot force them to come forward and say you have to be at station and you have to respond. And that's one thing that kind of frustrates me, that you guys are trying to impose as me as a chief to tell my volunteers, well, sorry, man, you can't go to your son's birthday because you have to volunteer, so we have to meet this 93%. Now, at the same time, is we always say that, we want you, how do you say it, that we want to come together, and as a fire department, as ESD too. So I don't see why there should be separation as far as if Montana Vista responds to Horizon, or that's a bad example. If I respond to Fabens, why should Fabens take the fall for them not responding when it's still a ESD2 vehicle responding to that call? I don't think there should be that individuality. Well, you're the bad kid. But at the same time, as a chief, I don't think I should be forced to tell my volunteers, well, guys, sorry, you guys can't go to your kid's birthday because we have to volunteer. Do you guys see where I'm coming from? That's very frustrating as a chief to make that decision.
I think that's a very strong example, Chief. That's a I don't think Chief Adler I can't speak for any of the other chiefs, but I doubt that the other chiefs who do make calls are telling their volunteers that, sir. I doubt that heavily that conversation is happening. And at the end of the day, again, we're talking about responding to people who need help. That's what this is about. I would love not to have to discuss this anymore, but as someone who represents the taxpayers who's put here on the board, my concern, and that's why we wanted to meet with you guys before, is for those 21, 23, 24, 27 calls that are not being met, what about them? That's my thing. And that's why we said, give us a plan. You tell us what's going on, what's happening there. So you're right. We are one ESD. And I'm pretty sure, Chief Cordero, that if next month I came and said, per Chief Cordero, we are consolidating all districts under one leadership, every chief would have an issue with that. There would not be one chief that would like the idea of consolidation. So what the point that I'm trying to get you, Chief, is we're talking about responding to people who are in need of help. That's the whole point of this. That's why we're having this discussion, is how do we go from that number of missed calls, and how do we progressively bring them down? I'm not asking you guys to go from 24 to 0 in a month. I know that's not going to happen. That's not what I'm asking. But, you know, we talked about early on in this conversation, an hour ago now, in fact, we talked about going and giving you guys 7 months to turn ship around. 7 months, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time to improve 2 or 3 calls a month, right? The little things like that. You improve 8 calls and you guys are good, Chief. We just want to see that there's improvement, that you guys are responding. No one's asking you to be perfect, but we can't keep hovering in the 80s, Chief. We have to be responding to people, and especially like you said, you and I are the same in that we have relatives in Fabens, we have relatives in Socorro, we have relatives in Clint. We're all over the Lower Valley. The people that have been here long enough, we're all related to each other one way or another, right? That's my concern for them, is that there will be a unit to respond, Chief. That's what this whole thing is about, is getting to them and having a plan to get to them.
And maybe you know, throughout this you know, years of me volunteering, you know, the idea of a per diem, I mean, can have crossed many people, you know. I mean, like I said, I would want to sit here and give you a definite answer to say, you know what, I'm going to respond to all these calls. And I can, sir, to be honest with you. And like I said, I would want to say that I'm going to have a medic for every call. I'm not. I mean, I would be sitting here lying to you. But at the same time, it's like, we're doing everything we can, or everything I can in my power to make it happen. You know, like I said, perfect example, last night, everybody was at home, you know, nice and cozy, drinking coffee, and guess where I was at? Running a call. You see what I mean? Like I said, we're trying to make it happen. We're trying as much as we want. I know, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, like I said, I don't complain about if I go to Socorro, if I go to Sanelli, if I go to Fabens, because my department sits in the middle. You know, because I know is that particular call that I'm running, that person's getting help. And I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, you know, I'm doing my best, and I can't sit there and say, you know what, I'm gonna have a call for everybody, because next month I might run 90%. The month after that, I might run 15%, because like I said, if I knew how to predict the call, I would, but I don't.
Commissioners, in the interest of time for this agenda item, if you all will take a suggestion that we meet with the 2 chiefs that are having the issue, and the commissioner of your choice to go over it, and then try to, or 2 commissioners, and try to get them some help to see how we can alleviate the problem. We can better print out the response times that they're having issues with, and to be able to present it to you all at the next meeting with a better understanding of where they're lacking. Okay. Of course, the times that the paid staff are there is the request of the chiefs. That's the way we're running. I do have a supervisor also available at 6, so even himself is still responding on calls if he needs to go on calls. But the fact is, right now, if we looked at just February 2020, they ran 72 calls. So even if you said 10% of that, let's say 7 calls in a month. That's 7 calls, and I gotta give it. I'll give it to Chief Adler. I came from West Valley, 23 years there, and we always ran our calls, and I can't take that away from us. It was a very demanding. Yes, there is a little bit of differences, and I've seen it. I'm not gonna sit here and say that there aren't differences, but it is doable. It is doable. It just takes a little bit of concentration to help them out. And I get it. Also, Chief Cordero is working night shift, so I got to give it to him, also responding on nights. But if we are going by that, we can even look at a lower percentage, but something that we can say we're trying to fix it, or maybe even get them a little bit more help. We'll figure that out. Let's try to have that meeting if you all are okay with it, and see what we can address with both departments.
So then Mike Barnes earlier talked about, Commissioner Barnes talked about 72 hours. Here's what I'd like to propose then, that either whoever the officer is from Fabens or Clinton that's going to meet with us, they have a week. And in a week, they're going to propose to us, they're going to talk to us, tell us what they're doing, what they need help with. Okay. I think that needs to be done. One way or another. Again, for those of you who live in areas that you're covered 100%, awesome. My concern is for the people who are not getting, that's my ultimate concern, is that everybody who's called, that the majority of them are getting, that we're going out there. So what I'd like to propose, commissioners, is that the chiefs have 1 week from today to meet with Chief Esparza, or one of the commissioners, two of us with Chief Esparza, and show us exactly what the plan is going forward. How are they going to fix this issue? I think that's fair. And and if they don't, I'm letting you commissioners know now, and everybody on the call, I'm going to propose this against next month, and I'll just continue doing it because we need to get this fixed. We want to help them. So I think a week is fair. And then Chief Esparza, by the time we meet, if you could have the numbers that show the difference between the marshals responding and then what they're responding to, the volunteers, so we can see and we can better understand. You're right, we need more data. We can better understand how to help our volunteers to make sure that they're responding to everybody. And yes, like you said, Chief Esparza, kudos to West Valley and East Montana, and for that 100%, and Soko and Sanelli for the work, and Fabens and Clint. We want to help you. Thank you for everything you guys do. You guys do a lot too. We want to improve it. We want to give you guys that help and get you guys up in those numbers. So that's what I propose, that they have 1 week to meet with us, to submit to us a plan on how they're going to improve. So that would be by next Tuesday, February 23rd.
Commissioners, just so I saw the message that Chief Adler wanted to speak on this item as well. Go ahead, Chief.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. Oh, good evening. Just real quick, I just wanted to, a lot's been said and I don't want to take up much time. I'm looking at the same report that the 911 district sends to Ms. Ramos. And just in January, I can verify that the assistant chief from Fabens was correct. I counted 10 calls that were dedicated for Fabens when paid staff should have been on duty. For instance, 1-4 at 7 a.m., 1-4 at 9:05 a.m. They're getting tagged with a no response there. And the reason that somebody may have responded, i.e. a fire marshal unit, but they're not coded in the system to be able to be inserted into that to show that there was a response from them. So just rough counting, I counted 10 right now. I sent this email to Mariana and I asked her to forward it to y'all. All the red boxes are the empty boxes that show there was no response for Fabens, at least. And I'm not going to go through this whole entire list, but I counted 10 just right off the bat that got counted against Fabens that should have had paid staff on duty. So he was correct, and Chief Esparza is correct that the calls were being answered by a fire marshal. It's getting lost in context and in computer programs with showing who actually went, because it's not showing a fire marshal unit anywhere in this as a responding unit. It only shows ones that are actually keyed and mapped into the program. So I just wanted to give that my 2 cents on that. And I think everything else has already been said. I think it's a dangerous precedent, as I said 2 years ago, to switch to any kind of percentage. I would more like to see an increase, i.e., okay, departments over the next quarter, I'd like you to do 5% increase of where you were a quarter ago. So it's measurable, it's attainable, it's not something that's too high that's going to put them out, because I hear these chiefs every single night. I hear Chief 301, Chief 302, Chief 201, Chief 601. They are responding and they are trying their butts off to make this work. And my hat's off to them, because they have families, they have kids, they have everything else going for them. I looked at my numbers alone for West Valley. We had almost 1,600 calls last year. I responded to 15.9, which is 289 calls. The rest of my officers that have take-home vehicles, they're far below me except for Chief Smith, in the 2s, 5s, 7s, 10s, but we make it work. So to set a precedence of 15, I would really hope that you guys reconsider that, to delete it, even if it comes back in 2 weeks. Make the goal of the department to increase steadily over quarters so you can see results. And remember that we set this up so if one department didn't respond, it would go to the next department after 2 minutes and vice versa. I've never been called out from West Valley to respond all the way to the east side of the county. So I know there's never been a fire call missed because it would have kept going all the way until it got out to me. So somebody is responding. That's all I have to say, Commissioners. I yield the floor.
They are responding, Commissioners. Our paid staff is picking up the slack where it needs to be. And I've always said it, it's ESD number 2 responding. It doesn't matter which department is responding. However, it is correct. If one department does not pick up at the time that there is no staff there, or even when there is staff, let's just say the paid staff is already on a call and there is a second call, the second department will be toned out and that department will get the credit for that call. So yes, it can happen vice versa. So the best thing we can do is run a report from the time that the staff is not there and kind of gauge it from there to see where we stand for all the departments and kind of get a better understanding. But like I said, all calls are being answered, whether it's Saneli, Clint, Socorro, with the exception of when they're tied up on another calls.
All right. Thank you, Chief Etler. I appreciate the idea on the quarterly growth. That's a good idea. Take into consideration. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Commissioner Avalos, I just wanted to say, you know, I really admire you for your persistence on this really important issue. I mean, I agree that it needs to be addressed. If only for equity amongst the different fire departments within ESD too, right? You know, we shouldn't have such discrepancies in the effectiveness and efficiency of the fire station. So as much as we can do to standardize that and equalize it, I think that's great. And I think today's discussion was really productive. So thanks for putting this on the table and for forcing us to address this. And I also wanted to say that I think we've been making steps to address this, right? So I think that the changes we made to the contracts last year, I think we saw a lot of improvement after we put those incentives in there for different things. And so we just need to keep going. And I just wanted to make one comment on the data, right? The data is helpful, but what I'd like to see is more strategy around data. So, you know, when you sit down with the chiefs, hear them out, look at the data, see where we can match things up, where ESD staff can make changes. You know, let's look at all of the different options, think outside of the box. What can we be doing to address this, and have the data back that
up. Commissioners, Commissioner Avalos, these were your agenda items. How would you like to proceed with this? We'll make a motion to assign 1 or 2 commissioners to have these meetings and come up the next meeting for a proposal between the chiefs that are in the listed?
Yes, sir. Let's just hear them out in more detail. I think that's important. And then that way we keep this going in the right way. And if there are areas that we are deficient in as an ESD or as a leadership team, then let's help them in that. Then let's get them the assistance they need and find out how we can get this going. So yes, sir, that would be my proposal tonight. And then motion. Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
So you want to make a motion for 2 commissioners to sit down with the 2 chiefs and kind of prepare, look at all the data and propose something by the next meeting?
Yes, sir. Correct.
And who would those 2 commissioners be?
I would like to volunteer. I have the time.
Yeah, I as well.
Okay, there you go.
So which I'm sorry, there's 3 of you that said.
No, go ahead.
Commissioner Santana and myself, sir.
And then why don't you put Mike Barnes as a backup, just in case one of y'all can't make it?
Commissioner Barnes, is that all right?
Good. I'm good with that. Most definitely.
So the motion is for 2 commissioners and myself to meet with the chiefs and look at all the data and come back at the next meeting with the proposal. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
This is for item number 12 and 13. Motion?
Yes, correct.
Commissioner Santana,
Aye.
second.
Second.
Commissioner Barnes, Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Butler,
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
and Commissioner Avalos.
Aye.
Motion carries. Commissioners, in the interest of time for the individuals that are waiting here, I'd like to see if you are willing to move item number 9 and 10.
Go ahead, sir.
Do you have a motion?
Motion.
I have a motion by Diaz and Santana, right?
Second, yes.
All right, item number 9, discuss and take action on financial audit by SBNG. Are you there?
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Yes, thank you very much, Chief. Thank you, commissioners, for having us here this afternoon. So we are here today to present the results of our financial statement audit for the fiscal year ended September 20. With me, I also have Monica Peña. Monica is our lead auditor from the firm that was responsible for this audit this year. So really, Monica was the auditor that carried the majority of the load this year, and I want to recognize her for her work. She's also in the meeting here in case you have any questions. And I was the manager responsible for reviewing and supervising the engagement, and this is my second year helping you all with your audit. So without further ado, I'll get into a brief presentation. I do have a copy of the financial statements in the audit report itself. And I also have a brief PowerPoint presentation that I would like to share with you, so we can provide a little bit of perspective on what the audit means and how this last audit period compares to others. So I will be sharing my screen with you briefly. Okay, and then I have the actual audit report. Now this is still, it's in draft format. It has been reviewed by Mariana, your administrative manager, and also by the chief, Roger Esparza. And I'll jump into the most important page, which is the audit report. Okay, so really the audit report is essentially a brief 2-page document. Is explaining, the financial statements that we're addressing. We're addressing fiscal year 2020. We're addressing a balance sheet and the income statement. Really, the responsibility for the financial statement is management and the commissioners. So you all need to approve this tonight. And then the auditor responsibility is to design an audit to be able to find any material errors or any significant errors in the financial statements, and also to address the risk of fraud. We are issuing a clean audit opinion, and what that means is that the financial statements that you're about to see, they have been audited and they do not contain any material errors, and they're also following the most current accounting guidelines in the U.S. So I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's a clean opinion, and that is it's the best kind of audit opinion that you can receive. And over the last at least 5 years, or as long as I've ever seen your financial statements, you continue to receive a clean opinion. So that's where you want to be. We did have one finding in internal controls, which we will discuss near the end of the presentation. And I'm happy to say that we did not become aware of any fraud or any abuse that would have to been reported in our audit report. So we have no matters of that nature to report. So really quick, the first statement that we're going to be seeing here on the screen is the balance sheet. And there's 2 ways to show this balance sheet. We have this full accrual basis or government-wide basis, which is going to show not only your current items, but it's also going to show long-term items, such as fixed assets, and it's also going to show long-term debt, right? So normally with financial statements like this, you only see them maybe once a year, maybe once every few months. Normally you see them in a different method, which is the government basis. But the good thing about this full accrual basis is that you get to see the big picture of where the district stands, right? So not only do we see the amount of cash on hand, but we see how much has been invested in equipment. We have $14 million, almost $15 million that has been invested in equipment and vehicles, and also, of course, in the new fire station that was, I'm sorry, not fire station, the new administrative building that was purchased 2 years ago. So that's represented here by this number. We also have the amount of long-term debt, and that's divided in the portion that is non-current and the portion that is current. And we see that we are approximately $9.5 million in long-term debt. And then, of course, we have the cash position. So the district does have over $7 million in cash. And interesting to say, this is a significant change from the previous audit. In the previous audit, you ended that audit with $22.6 million in cash, and now we have $7 million in cash. Well, there was also a significant increase in long-term debt, right? So we borrowed an additional $3 million near the end of the fiscal year. So a big part of the change in your cash account is coming from that new debt that was borrowed. So your total assets are $25 million. Your liabilities are $10 million. So your net worth or your excess funds are $15 million, which is a very, very good net position, right? If you were be looking at this, comparing it to like a financial company, right? A for-profit company. Now, something that I want to point out, your income for the year, you also had a good year in terms of your revenues and expenses. And that's what I'm going to be showing right here. So we have your statement of governmental changes in governmental funds. Now, the district only has one general fund, right? Other governments are going to have different funds. Other governments might have a debt service fund or might have a special revenue fund. Your structure is pretty simple in the way that you only have one general fund, right? So all the expenses and all the revenues are going to be here. So, of course, the most important line of revenue here is your property taxes. Your property taxes, the amount of revenue that you collected actually increased from the previous year by approximately 10%. And I mean, that's a trend that we saw with other local governments that we work with in this year that we're auditing everybody, right? So you're in line with what we've seen here in El Paso. Sales taxes also increased by approximately the same amount, by a 9% change. And that's also consistent with what we've seen in other governments that collect sales taxes. So it was a good year. Despite the pandemic, I mean, we feel like a lot of it is coming from grocery stores, places like Walmart, retailers that remained open, and you get to, be a part of that, as you can see here, in an increase in your sales taxes. The other important source of revenue is charges for services, and this is essentially fire marshal fees and inspection fees. And actually, that one also increased in comparison to the previous year. And there was one particular job that was very big in 2020 that helped you guys raise more funds from this stream of revenue. So altogether, your revenues were $7.8 million. And again, that's about more than a 10% jump from the previous audit. Your expenses, they actually were a little different than the previous year. Your main line of expenditures is going to be this public safety line item, and that's going to include your salaries, and it's going to also include the cost to run the station and all the discretionary expenses. So needless to say, the expenses actually were less than the previous fiscal year. Not by a lot. We're talking about a 1%, 2% decrease from one year to another. So there's different factors that are playing in this. There's, of course, COVID-19. So there's a lot of discretionary expenses that were not incurred because of COVID-19. There's less travel. There's more time working from home, so that's saving a little bit of money in that regard. But we also see somewhat the effect of centralizing your purchases and starting to control everything under a single budget. That is a big change, I believe, and it started happening in the year that we're auditing. So we'll get to see next year how that new policy, that centralization of expenses, continues to change the way how you spend money. But in summary, in 2020, you did spend less expenses for the maintenance of the district than in other years. Your capital outlay is also down. Capital outlay represents the amount of equipment purchases and vehicles and investment in your building, and essentially expenditures that have a useful life that goes beyond 1 year. So in the previous year, you had a really big year in terms of capital outlay because you bought the new admin building. And then in the current audit that we did in 2020, I mean, you can see that it's only about $700,000. Still a pretty large number, but very, very small compared to what it was last year. And then, of course, the other item that's very important is your debt service. As you can see, your debt service, it's about a third of your expenditures, and that number remained essentially flat, right? There was not a big change in your debt service from 1 year to another. Altogether, you had a surplus of $1.4 million. So again, increase in revenue and consistent expenditures, less capital outlays, that's leading to an increase in your reserves, right? So this money here is increasing your reserves that are going to be available to spend money in the following years. And then last but not least, another important item is the new debt that was borrowed. The new debt here is adding on to the amount of debt that you have, to the amount of funds that you have available to spend. So you did borrow those $3.3 million. They did not remain, they were not spent. They were not spent prior to the end of the year. So these funds are committed, right? Committed for the following year. I am going to show you a really quick PowerPoint that's going to summarize these numbers in a way that are a little bit easier to understand. And let me show that to you right now. So like I said, I mean, we did have a clean audit opinion. By the way, our audit is being conducted in accordance to governmental auditing standards. So what that means is that basically we're spending more time looking at your internal controls, and basically the bar for the auditor is a little higher than in a standard audit, right? Because we're basically following standards promulgated by the federal government. Again, there's no instances of fraud, waste, or abuse. When we do a Jello Book audit, we're supposed to report those, and we did not find any of those. And we do have one finding, and we have a few recommendations. The numbers here, really brief. You can see the big increase in cash from the previous year. Again, a lot of it has to do with your new debt, those $3 million that were borrowed right at the end of the year. Your fixed assets, they remain almost the same. There was not a big jump in fixed assets. Your debt, you can see that your debt actually increased, right? So, and this is after you made all your debt payments and everything for the year. You started with 7.7, you ended with 9.6. Your accounts payable is a little bit down. I mean, you had less expenses, and of course, at the end of the year, there was less liabilities. Your revenues, as we were talking, total revenues for the general fund are up 14%. The operating expenditures are down 3%. Your debt principal is, it's only down by 2%. And then here's the new debt. And altogether, including the new debt, we added $4.8 million to your fund, right, to the general fund. Some key ratios, the number of calls, you actually had more calls than what was reported in the last audit. It was a pretty good increase. And then you also had less expenses. So we have here a very favorable change in this ratio that we'd like to show, which is your total expense per call, right? And then if you look at not only your total expenses, but only your operating expenses, that ratio also went down, right? So we had about the same amount of expenses, but we had a lot more calls. So that's a really good trend. Hopefully this is something that we can continue to see. Your fund balance, of course, is up. Last year, your fund balance covered about 40% of your expenses. The number for this year, it is a little skewed because we do have those $3 million in debt that haven't been used yet. So your fund balance is pretty big. Obviously, once you spend that money, this 124% is going to go down. And by the way, those $3 million, they're reserved for a new fleet, which I believe maybe by now it's already been expended because it was supposed to be expended in the last quarter of 2020. And then the last thing is the finding, of course. And this is a repeat finding with modification. What that means is that the finding was present last year, and it's still coming up again, but we have some modifications. And essentially what we are asking is that we are suggesting and we're asking the district to fully develop a policy for counting and keeping track of inventory and I'm sorry, of equipment in particularly. So this was present last year. We did do a review of your internal controls in the area of equipment control, and we sampled some items that were included in your inventory for equipment. And we noted that some of the items were being moved around from one station to another. Not all the equipment has tags, and it just seems like it was really hard to keep up with what inventory we have on hand and what's being moved from one station or another. So we recommended that a policy be implemented. Now, fast forward in the year 2020, there is now a policy, but we still feel like the policy has not been fully implemented. So what we're recommending is that the ESD actually staff a position or assign responsibility to somebody in their staff for conducting monthly inventory reviews, and not only actually conducting them, but also documenting the equipment that is being monitored, the actual test counts that are being done on this equipment on multiple stations on a monthly basis. And if we can do it on an annual basis, that would be even better. And that documentation, it has to be retained and needs to be made available to the auditor, so the auditor can verify that you are actually looking at your inventory throughout the year. So that is really the only finding. And as you can see, it's not really a problem. It's just a big area of improvement that we're pushing ESD to spend a little bit more time looking into this. And the reason being is because you are very equipment heavy. I mean, as you look at your balance sheet, I mean, your equipment is a big proportion of your assets, right? $16 million is more than half of your assets. So we got to make sure that we have good controls on that, and that we are somehow monitoring the valuable equipment that is in each one of the stations, and that we're keeping track of the inventory as it's moving from one place to another. So that is really the only finding, and we believe that, with some time, it's going to be resolved. We're hoping that the next time that we do the audit, we'll be able to see some inventory reports or some cycle count documentation that we can use to attest that there's actually a function going on in monitoring this inventory. I mean, we have a policy, we have a listing, we have tax on a lot of items, but now we need to actually start monitoring. So that's the missing key here. And then the recommendations, very straightforward. We want you guys to look at your investment policy. Your investment policy is very loosely written. We feel like you can take a second look at it and make sure that it has all the things that it needs to have. Normally, other governments work with their attorney to get this in good shape, and it should be updated annually, and it should be in your commissioner meetings every year that you've reviewed it and you are accepting it or ratifying it or doing any amendment to it. And then the last thing is that we want to make sure that as you implement new policies, it is always documented that those policies are approved in commissioner meetings, right? So we do know that there's a lot of changes that are going on, and sometimes there's policies that are being implemented. We got to make sure that they're formally approved in writing, and that the commissioners are always approving them, right? So we know that we're trying to centralize expenses. We're trying to move more things into the district's control. So as we implement those changes, we got to make sure that the proper evidence is documented in the minutes. We were not able to see it in all times, and that's why it's a recommendation. So that's all we have. I don't know at this point if there's any questions from the commissioners, if there's any comments, anything that I can answer for you all.
Real quick, Theo, what's the investment policy?
Okay, the investment policy is a policy that is required by the Texas Municipal Code. And essentially, it's a document that establishes the kind of investment accounts that the district can have. And I'll let you know something else. You guys are probably my only government client that does not have any kind of investment. You guys have all your money in bank accounts. You don't invest in governmental pools or CDs or money markets or anything like that. You don't have to do it. There's nothing wrong with having your money in cash accounts. But I mean, I think it's an area of opportunity because I see that some other governments, they generate some interest income from these investments. So that's the starting point, looking at whether you want to do that. I mean, right now you have $7 million in cash, or you had it there in September. You might have already spent some of that, but you still are, normally have over $1 million in your bank account. And it might be a good idea to at some point think about whether you're going to invest in different kinds of securities, right, of different kinds of investment instruments. Now, your investment policy is a written document that should establish what investments are allowable or are going to be, I guess, to the commissioner's satisfaction. And normally, what you see is that you see governments investing in governmental pools. You see maybe money market accounts, things that are, in my opinion, very low risk, but nonetheless are going to give you a little bit more interest or a little bit more return than just your regular bank account. Also, you want to make sure that all your funds are collateralized. So right now, all your funds are collateralized, right? And that's another requirement of this investment policy. But if you're going to invest in other kinds of investments, you got to make sure that those investments are secured somehow, right? And normally you want to look at the investment ratings for these companies or these investment pools that you're going to be working with. The other thing that's very important is that you need to select an investment officer. And normally an investment officer is one of the commissioners, and it can also be a member of management. It can be a member of the district. But that investment officer is ultimately responsible for monitoring, the return that these investments have and making decisions as to what accounts are we going to be investing on. So that is what your investment policy is. It actually is supposed to be presented in your audit, right? And all these things are supposed to be disclosed. And a lot of these things you don't have. I mean, your investment policy is very, very limited, and it doesn't define any of these things. And that's why we're recommending that you go ahead and work with an attorney to have a proper investment policy, and that you also consider, why not, looking at other alternatives than having your investments just in your bank account, your cash just in your bank account.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioners, as to the finding, we did create the policy. Eddie is doing every 15th of the month, or as a matter of fact, the first Monday after the 15th, or if it lands on the weekend, he is doing a pool of all the assets. We did run into, it's just like Theo said, when we are tracking again equipment, the chiefs moved the equipment without notifying our purchasing. And when we're looking at them, they're no longer in the locations that they are. So now we're doing more of asset reviews, and he is sending emails to all the chiefs, so they will be available for the next audit.
I do want to point out, in our last audit, we had 3 findings. So 2 findings were already cleared, and now we're down to only this one. So I think we're going in the right direction, and we're hoping that next year we'll see a lot of progress.
Awesome.
Chief, I have a question. So the policy that you just mentioned, I guess this question is for Theo. The policy that Chief just mentioned, that they're implementing this inventory review policy, are those the kinds of things that the commissioners need to approve?
Yes. So, for example, if for whatever reason you want to make a, like right now, earlier you were talking about possibly adopting a new policy that is going to, you know, impose some goals, right? Some productivity goals, some goals in terms of meeting calls and all those things. Sometimes I see that you guys approve these things, but then do we actually have it in writing? Do we have a standard operating policy? Do we have a manual? And is that manual ratified by you all, right? And then that, I think that's the step that sometimes we miss, right? And for us, what we want to know, what we want to see when we do an audit is we want to get to the audit. We want to ask for all the new policies that were implemented in the year, all the changes. And then we want to see if those changes were correctly communicated to everybody. And then we want to be able to trace back to your agenda minutes to see if you actually voted on those, to see if you actually saw the new standard operating policies. So I just feel that sometimes we don't always follow all those steps. And even though there's been a lot of changes, it's not really clear whether everything has been documented in writing, right? And whether we have adopted SOPs for all these things, right? And this year we did have a lot of changes in terms of how we do procurement, how you handle credit cards, how you move a lot of money from that used to be in imprest accounts. Now it's all back with the district. I think those changes make sense. But where's the documentation, right? I mean, where is all the policies that are saying, well, this is how we're going to do things now. This is going to be the designated person. We got to make sure that we document this. 5 years from now, we got to make sure that there's a manual there that can help us understand what the purposes of these policies are. And if we document it, and if the commissioners not only approve the changes in spirit, like you seem to have been doing this year, but also approve the actual formal policies and procedures in writing, I think that's the best practice.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Chief, I think we need to be more diligent about that. So
Yes, as a matter of fact, I had the board ratify these items already, so they were ratified in January.
the purchasing policies, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I know, but when you just mentioned a little while ago, you have a new inventory review policy.
That was in the policy.
That was in the policy?
Mhm.
Okay.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Wally, I know you were waiting for this one. Is he here?
No, thanks, Chief. I appreciate that. We just wanted to let the board know that we're asking Telo to present the audit to the Commissioners Court next Monday on the 22nd as well. Not sure if you heard me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's it.
Yes, sir.
Well, we're fine and agreed as far as the finding and the second year on the inventory, and just important that be addressed in a timely fashion this upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you, Wally.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Wally.
Any other questions, Commissioners?
No, sir.
Do I have a motion to accept?
Make a motion.
Second.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Butler,
Aye.
Commissioner Santana,
Aye.
and Commissioner Avalos.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 10, discuss and take action on proposed contract with Gano HR. Thank you, Tayo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Commissioners.
Thank you, and thanks
Thanks, guys. Thank
to
you.
our accounting and finance staff at the ESD
Yes,
for all your hard work.
this
on
was a great job from all our team. Thank you.
Thanks to you all. You have a nice evening. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cano, you have the floor.
Good evening, commissioners. I don't know if you have in front of you the proposal that I submitted last week, a couple weeks ago. Chief Esparza, Commissioner Butler, and Commissioner Santana, we met and had a discussion about Cano HR and ESD number 2. And some of the discussions we had was, the involvement, and to clarify a couple things as far as the expectations and again, how much we get involved from an HR perspective. Chief is, and if I say something that is incorrect, Chief, please correct me, but Chief is under the assumption that occasionally we'll say we're HR consultant or we're the HR team, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we clarified that a couple weeks ago. I know Commissioner Butler has some questions and Commissioner Santana as well. And we had that discussion clarification. Chief and I met prior to that meeting, and we had a lengthy discussion about the expectations, about our role, and what we bring to the table to the ESD. And obviously, the biggest thing here is, as I mentioned to Chief, we have to be good for the ESD for this to continue, of course. And we feel that we've got the experience, we've got all the staff to be able to handle anything that the ESD envisions and the HR aspect of things. So that being said, we submitted the proposal, and I did mention to Commissioner Butler, Santana, and Chief that as we're growing in staff, growing in clientele. I will repeat to all of you that we are not experts in every industry. We're experts in HR, and so that being said, we would like to continue to have that relationship with ESD, again, so long as the ESD feels that Cano HR is good for the district. So that being said, again, if you have the proposal in front of you, not sure if you had the opportunity to read it, and I would like to open the floor to any questions from the rest of the commissioners, board members, and Commissioner Butler or Santana, if they have any additional questions or comments. I'd like to open the floor.
Tommy and team, thanks for being here tonight, and thanks, Tommy, for the meeting we had a couple of weeks ago. I really don't have much to add, except I think in our discussion with you, we, Commissioner Santana and I felt that the second option is the most appropriate and needed for ESD2 at this time, right? That's the more intensive option where you're more involved with some of the day-to-day policies and HR needs of the district versus basically how we've been operating prior to this, which is more as a consultant, hands-off type of provider. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes. Those two options, Tommy, if you could, for the other commissioners, the difference between or what else do we get with the second option? I mean, for us, for the ESD number 2, what do we expect from that option number 2?
Sure, and Commissioner Santana and Commissioner Butler, again, I assume that the rest of the commissioners have this proposal in front of them, right?
Yes, sir, we have it on the Dropbox.
Yeah, we got it.
If you look at all these pages, I think it's a total of 4 pages. HR is a very difficult, I guess, type of department responsibility to explain. It's very inclusive when it comes to personnel matters, but sometimes it seems to involve operation matters. And we try to streamline everything that is personnel matters. And so this proposal gives you, I did as best as I could, Commissioner Butler and Santana, to try to simplify everything that we could do for you without, sending a 30 or 40 page proposal, because there's just so much. Option one and option two, as you see on the screen there, if you can scroll up a little bit, option one is that alone, consulting the commissioners, the chief, members of management, administrative team, the staff on HR practices. And option number two is not only establishing, but also manage the practices, to sit down with chief and look at SOPs and look at any other policies and protocols that need to be put in place. Instead of just giving him a recommendation, we would sit with him and work on these parameters and policies. And those are, from walking in the front door to preparing to go out the back door, and then what happens after the back door, providing any information on audits, I will say that it was a combination of things. And I always have told Chief that we are a consulting company. It's consulting group, Kano HR consulting group, right? But we don't want to overcommit and say that we're going to be there 5 days a week, 7 days a week, because that's not who we are. But we would like to be as involved as possible to establish a lot of these protocols and manage these protocols. We want to be more involved in sitting down with a group and start putting in place HR protocols, practices when it comes to chain of command, how to teach your management staff in handling their own personnel staff, their own subordinates, things of that nature. So we would sit there, we would talk to them, we would create policy, we will show them how to do the write-ups, we will do the write-ups for them. We will show them the verbiage, we will educate them on practices on how to hire individuals, but we would also get involved in what would be the hiring practices, the completion of paperwork, and of course, we would be teaching the staff at the same time so that they can understand the reason why we're asking for certain documentation, the reason we say we can't make a decision just based on hearsay, et cetera, et cetera. So again, if you go to the last page, it pretty much tells you all the things you have to worry about in HR. And it should be 4 pages. I don't know if Mariana's scrolling or Chief is scrolling, but it's the very last page, page 4. There you go. That's the addendum that, we have to discuss with Chief, and not every single item here is relevant to ESD number 2, but there's a lot of stuff here that we know, that we're familiar with, that we have helped either manage, assist in monitoring compliance. And so instead of, again, option 1 would be recommending Chief how to handle it, we would help him handle the situation and also teach him, so that, again, in the future, as we continue to grow, he would know exactly how and why we're handling, and these reports will be produced to the board as to why there was FMLA, no FMLA, disciplinary actions. If there are going to be employee evaluations, we get involved in the evaluation piece. We would be part of the committee versus teaching you how to create a committee. So I'm trying to give you a brief, I guess, simple examples of consulting and managing. So I hope I didn't confuse you anymore, but again, it's as simple as I can keep it. Just giving you a recommendation over the phone versus getting involved. So that's essentially what we would like to do, and that's probably the best option for ESD. As you continue to grow, commissioners, it is important. If you all recall, some of you have been on the board, sat on this board for quite a while now, and the growth itself. Now when we're looking at different lieutenants handling, I believe up to 4 or 5 firefighters, and our assistant chief becoming, full-time from a part-time position. The growth has, it's forced you to take steps in that direction because it's very difficult to manage it. So we want to teach those in that chain of command. And we've had this discussion before. And that was a discussion that Chief and I had a couple, 2-3 weeks ago, as to the understanding and the relationship of our role in the HR role with the ESD, and how to teach the Marianas of the world and Salcedos of the world on how to handle their subordinates. And Chief manage the pretty much the management team, so the department heads, and so the things that I would like to continue to put in front of him with the support of the board and his support as well, so that we can continue to grow in the same direction, because the growth is going to push all of you, and including the chief, to forcefully do that. Otherwise, it would fail.
Tommy, any differences or disagreements between you or Kano and our supervisors, our management? How are those resolved?
So if there's any disagreements, we are usually, the disagreements to your question, Commissioner Santana, is not agreeing with certain practices or laws, whether it be state or county or federal laws. And and some of the other disagreements would be more procedural disagreements. And our approach on that is really to put it on the table and show them, not just through our word of mouth, but through some form of document, something tangible, to prove to them the effects of following the recommendations. From, I mean, you name it, from, and the ones that come to mind, I'm not picking one in particular, but the ones that come to mind is, I know Chief and I have had a disagreement in how the staff would report their absences. And of course, a recommendation was not kosher for Chief, but through, I guess, the weeks and maybe even the years, he's come to understand why, we suggest that they follow their chain to do report a simple absence. But any disagreement, I think, would be something that we would bring to the board for clarification, possibly not necessarily all the board, but maybe kind of like what we did a couple weeks ago. I'm very big on these committees, and I know that they didn't really take off because of timing issues. But our recommendation would be to go to either yourself, Commissioner Santana, as the chair of the board, and say, here's a recommendation. What do you think? If there's still some disagreement, then there would be your call to bring it to the board, because of course the board is supposed to create policies. They're supposed to not act as supervisor, but establish protocols and policies. And if you don't establish them, ask your in this case, chief or department heads to create and establish SOPs so that you can improve them. So I think that would be the process. I don't know if I answered your question, Commissioner Santana, but our relationship is not about creating disagreements. I mean, we fix problems for a living. We're not there to create them for you. That's the last thing we want to do. But we do see a lot of disagreements even within your management team, and so we have to listen to both sides of the story and give our fair share of whatever we see. I mean, and I like to tell my clientele, if we are upsetting the employees and in this case the board or possibly even chief, then we're doing our job. Because when we're only upsetting one party, then I don't think we're doing our job. That would be obviously lopsided. So, but we don't do it for that purpose. We do it because one party or the other is not going to agree with certain protocols that are set in place. So we'll do the best we can to weed it out and make it to where it's at least a common ground.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
From your old contract, Mr. Cano, how do you feel this new contract is going to work for us?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Diaz, if you can elaborate a little bit more. What do you mean by?
The first contract that we're on right now, from paying you 500 to going to this new contract, what's the difference in service? How much more are you going to be there? I mean, I know you're telling me you're not going to be there every day. My question to you, another question would be, how do you feel about, or how many times were you needed before, and how many times are you going to be here now? I guess that's my question.
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer because as far as timing, I will say that because, of course, before the number of employees that you had before, and in comparison to the number of employees now, you're going to have more issues now. But you know, it sounds like an oxymoron. It's always best not to have HR involved all the time, because if you do, you have serious issues going on. When it comes to that matter, Commissioner Diaz, what we want to do is we want to get more involved, and possibly, of course, with this whole COVID thing going on, we are visiting our clients, probably not as much as we want them to, if they would want us to, but by the same token, our clients are holding us back because of COVID reasons. But we want to go in, Commissioner Diaz, and we want to again resurface the protocols and start doing more of a linear chain of command training, development, and of course that's going to be really on the accessibility and the feasibility of chief and the staff. When it comes to investigations, Commissioner Diaz, if everybody's behaving, then you're not going to hear from us much, because everybody's behaving. When we say hear from us, you know, we're going to be dealing a lot with chief, and setting those protocols. And but once we get those protocols in place, then now it's just really managing it, you know, from afar. And if we need to be there in person, we'll be there in person. But usually what makes us show up more often is when we have personnel issues, when we have investigative issues. We would like to get involved in the hiring piece. So if chief says, I want you to train my staff on how to do it, and then you all do the paperwork when it comes to the I-9s and things of that matter, you know, that's our involvement. If you hire 10 people within 2 weeks, then you're going to see us very often there in those 2 weeks. But if you don't hire someone for, you know, every other month, perhaps, then as far as the hiring piece, we're not going to get to be there all the time. So it's a very difficult question to answer, Commissioner Diaz, because it's all driven on how the district is growing and how they grow. What takes more time is the creation of protocols, the trainings. Those are things that we want to do more often. And so that is something that we would like to do once a quarter if possible. But we would like to be as involved as we can, but it's really going to be driven by the chief, to be honest with you. Because I'll give you an example. If you have a firefighter who's had an altercation with another coworker, another firefighter, and chief handles that and doesn't involve us, that's on chief, right? But if chief says, you know, we want the department head, we want the lieutenant to get involved as the direct supervisor of these two individuals and reach out to HR, human resource, and guide him. I just want to clarify that it is not our duty to fire your people, okay? That's not human resources duty. Our duty is to ensure that if Mariana or a lieutenant or the assistant chief or the chief himself would like to discipline and eventually terminate an employee, our job is to ensure that they have the proper paperwork, all the supporting documentation to give them the green light to say, okay, we're ready to go. Again, I want to clarify that I don't think there's a disagreement in this, Chief, but it's not our role, Commissioner Diaz, that employee shows up late to work, that you're going to call HR so HR can drive over there and write up your employee. That's the wrong use of human resources. I think you come from a company that has human resource, and that's not their role. It's the manager's role that handles that through human resources guidelines and protocols and recommendations. So
Yeah,
that.
and as an employee, you know, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to find out from the last, let's take the last 3 years, Mr. Cano.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you seen yourself in the last 3 years? Has it, our necessity of having you around, has it been increased more, or is it about the same? Where are we? I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand as well.
Okay. So I would say going back to a couple of years ago, Chief used to call me almost at least 2-3 times a week, Chief. I know you're mute, but about 2-3 times a week, if not more.
Sorry.
And, you know, it was different matters, different situations. I want to say that probably in the last couple of years, and not, I don't think it was, you know, specifically because of that, but I think ever since Ken came on board, the calls to me have dropped. Okay, I don't control that, Commissioner Diaz. It's really Chief's call, but I have seen that drop significantly. To answer your question,
Actually, in the last couple of years, commissioners, I've have let the supervisors handle their own staff. So a lot of it is unknown to me until it's already too late. So that's why the calls have dropped, unless there is an issue where I'm getting involved. But other than that, they're handling it at their level. And if it doesn't go beyond that level, then that's where it stops.
Okay. Or is this a case where we're going to Ken for HR reasons versus going to HR for HR reasons?
Negative, because we'd be seeing a big bill.
and again, I'm not saying that that's exactly what's going on, but I can say that since then the calls just plummeted. I think Chief would call me maybe once every 2 weeks after that. And maybe it was because he was having his staff handle the issues. But my concern is that none of his staff really reached out to us. And again, it's issue that we can fix. Okay, so, I know we've had a couple of emails back and forth between Chief, having us try to handle some of those write-ups, and that's the clarity that we want to implement. That's your management team needs to understand exactly how to manage, with all due respect.
Okay, so Chief, you've been training a lot of the people, a lot of the supervisors and lieutenants and stuff like that. You've been letting them do it now.
They receive their own not coming to work. They receive their own handling of whatever it is that the argument is at whatever stations. Because of course we're firemen, so we're not always going to agree with everybody at the particular station. So they are handling their own. If it doesn't make it up to us, even though we hear it, but if the lieutenants handle it, then that's where that issue dies until it gets to us.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's all I got.
Well, I think as far as this agenda item, we have used Ken a lot, and that's a good thing. He's worked for us. We do need HR, and I personally am comfortable with you guys, Tommy. I don't know if anybody ever has any more questions. We could make a motion. Or
And
I
I'm
would
just
like
glad
to
to
make-
see, I'm glad to see his mug back and his experts back there.
I do have a question, Tommy, because
Thank
I know you and I talked about this, and I didn't see it anywhere on any of these options. But you and I did talk about the fact that I needed you all for commissioners, and this is one of the things that I've been working on. We did become authorized regional testing center for Texas Commission on Fire Protection. So one of the things that I did need, Mr. Cano, for is a proctor. This is going to alleviate us as a district to be able to get all our firefighters that are Texas Commission on Fire Protection certified to be able to test here monthly at our facility versus us having to pay for them to go either Midland, Odessa, San Antonio, Dallas, wherever the testing's happening. And this is one of the things that I did talk to, because the only people they will allow for it to be proctors is our human resources. But I didn't see it anywhere in here.
And it's more of that's more of a moderating role, is the way I understand it, Chief. And I mean, obviously, it's still very unclear as to, how much time we're going to be spending. I did mention to you over the phone, I think it was a couple of weeks ago when we talked about that, when we got that email, it was still very unclear, and I didn't want to add anything to that. Because remember I mentioned it might be a different type of billing for that, because I want to make sure that we're not is to spend more time with that and not give the ESD the time it deserves. Do you understand? I don't want to overcommit if it's something that is going to require us to be there more than, and it doesn't really benefit the ESD other than just the licensing issue. But I mean, it's inclusive in there. If it's something that because initially what we said, it was just once a month, correct?
Yeah, then they made us a regional testing center. They approved us for being a regional testing center, which is first time, I'm proud to say, the county is actually taking part in being a regional testing center for the state. And this is a good thing for us, and it's a good thing for all our volunteers, because we
Right.
currently do send our guys to test out in Midland, Lubbock, San Antonio, wherever the test is happening. So by us becoming a regional testing center, it does allow us to do that in-house once a month.
And I think a couple of weeks ago when we spoke, you said you were going to do a little more research to see how
Yes.
much more, because I think it was once a month, but it sounds like it's going to be more than once a
No,
month.
it's right now it's once a month. Of course, if we wanted to do it weekly, it could, but that's not what we're looking for. I think monthly is more than enough, but it depends on how many people. It could be from 2 hours to 4 hours.
Yep. And I guess once we get the clarity on that, Chief, I'd be more than happy to, let you know what, I want to know a little bit more before I just shoot something in the dark. Because I want to make sure if it's once a month for 2, 3, 4 hours, I'm not going to sweat it, to be honest with you. But if it's a weekly thing and it's 3, 4 hours a day, every week, then it's going to be, we're talking about 20 hours a month. So that's going to be a little more concerning.
No, it's just pretty much like I said. They want us to tell them we want the first Tuesday of the month or the third Tuesday of the month, and they're gonna send whoever is in this region from us as well. If our guys need a test, this is where they will be testing.
Yep. Yeah, if we do it monthly, I don't have a problem with that, Chief. And I can include it in there if you want me, but I just want to make sure we get an email clarifying that it's every whatever Tuesday,
Yeah.
Every third Tuesday of the month or second Tuesday or whatever the case may be.
Okay. No, nothing else, commissioners. Anybody else?
Chief, are you comfortable with keeping Cano Human Resources as consultants? Are you okay with that?
Oh yeah, I've
You're
never had
on
a
the
problem
toes of
with
Mr. Cano the
Cano.
most.
Me and him talked about it, and one of the things that I did say, and he said it a couple of times already, is that sometimes we got the clarity is like we're human HR consultants, or that's why I wanted clarification, because we can't be titter-tottering back and forth. Are you HR consultants or you are HR? So based on what you all, and like he said earlier, on option number 2, he's putting those, and if he's willing to do the HR proctoring, of course, we're eventually going to be taking some, also looking to send some of the staff, in addition to what he's going to provide us, to some HR classes for fire departments. So
Okay, so there's no misunderstandings, there's no animosity, everything's out in the open. You guys have an understanding of what's expected now?
yes.
Okay, all right.
I just wanted to comment on a couple of things that stood out to me when we were talking and in the proposal that I appreciate, which is more time for training with the management team and with the staff of the ESD. That's something that I think will make a big difference, and I'm glad that that's in here, and hope to see more investment in that. And then actually creating a management team, right? Like Chief Esparza, I know that you've worked really hard to do this, but making sure that your management team has the tools and the resources and the knowledge, and know that they can reach out to Tommy too if they have questions, right? Or if they have unresolved issues, that Tommy's and his team are a resource for your entire management team. I think it's going to make a big difference, and will help just have a smoother running operation. So I'm looking forward to that. And then Tommy, you mentioned that you'd like to provide regular updates or reports to the board, just so that we're more informed of the work that you're doing, especially, at the beginning when you're going to be working on a lot of different policies and protocols, so that we are kept in the loop about the work that's happening internally. And a reminder that Tommy reports, is also as a consultant to the commissioners, right? So we're responsible for ensuring that you're running effectively, and that you're doing the job that you're charged with, you and your team, Tommy. So it's on us also to hold you accountable, and having reports will help that too.
Absolutely, Commissioner. I'm glad you brought that up, because my loyalty is to ensure that if the employees have a right and the employer or the manager is violating their rights, my loyalty is to the law and to the rights of the employee, and vice versa. If the employee is, violating protocols, and those protocols are being set, approved, ratified, then we have to, our loyalty is to that particular law. At the end of the day, I have to do what's best for the ESD, and the ESD is going to do what's best for you as a commissioners, the board, and also the staff. So I don't have any friendships here. That's not my intent, and this is not about creating those relationships. We stopped going to, I think we may not even, Chief, I don't know, did we ever go to any of your Christmas gatherings?
You weren't invited.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
I know that we get invited every single year,
Hey,
but I
sort of
think
like the executive session.
we play that role for a reason, because I know ESD one invited us every year, and I think if you guys had your first ones, we made it very clear we don't want to be involved in that for the benefit of clarity to the employees, that we want to remain a neutral party. So that's a benefit for the ESD, and it's not. I'm not here to benefit anybody. And at the end of the day, whatever recommendations you bring to the table and you want us to pass on as a policy, that's our role. Whatever recommendations we bring to the table that you should approve as a policy, you make that call and you make that vote. And if it gets voted, then it goes into effect. We just need to be involved in the personnel matters. One thing I just want to clarify is we don't want to be blindsided. Personnel matters, that's our role. Legal matters, you have Ken for that. But when it comes to personnel matters, we have to be involved because to Commissioner Diaz's question, how much do we get involved? Well, obviously, the ball's in your court at that point. You know, you control that. If you want to keep me out, then, you know, you're not going to see me as involved as it needs to be. So we want to provide those monthly reports, Ms. Butler, just like you have your different accounting, your CPAs reporting. We would like to provide as short or extensive as it needs to be, depending on the activity. That's why I have my team here, Cindy Ramirez and Brenda. They're familiar with boards. They're familiar with the role of a board member. So they're going to be also very vocal about this. But we would like that opportunity that every month we would, even if we have nothing to report, we'd like to see a line item saying, you know, human resources report. And but that's essentially what we'd like to see going forward. And would like to clarify that we report directly to the board.
You do? Wait, you want to clarify?
That we, Kano HR reports, the human resource reports directly to the board?
Oh, that is a good question.
You know, you usually, if you recall, I think Commissioner Diaz has been probably on the board the longest, and probably Santana, both of you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if you recall, there was at some point there was a chain of command that was floating out there, and legal and your HR and your CPA were kind of standalone underneath the board, if you recall that.
Yeah,
Maybe
that was made under our previous legal that we had.
Okay. So I don't know that, I guess.
But I mean, you still have to report, like, let's say that's one of my subordinates is already at the point where there's a problem. You still have to report it to me so that I can know what's going on, because realistically, like I said, I've got other things to worry about, so I'm letting them handle it. But if it gets to that point, I mean, you still have to, you know, tell me as the chief as this is already happening.
Oh, no, and I'm not excluding you in any way. I'm just asking who do I report to, because, yeah, absolutely, Chief. Anything that happens under your watch, under your chain, absolutely, you will be notified. You will be involved probably as well. But I just want to make sure that, you know, we have a clear understanding what our role is and who we report to, so that, again, there's no confusion there.
Well, I mean, the way it's been working, I mean, Chief is our head there at the district.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're not there 7 days, you know, 5 days a week to be able to know what's going on, Tommy. So, I mean, that's kind of a hard question. I mean, would you report to us? I mean, I don't think
I think
that would be the proper.
I mean, I don't have a problem with him giving a report monthly. I don't have an issue with that. But like I said, if there is employee matters here of somebody it'd have to be to me. It wouldn't be to the board to wait till the next moment, because if there's something that needs to be done, I would be the one to handle it. So, but if there is a bigger issue, then it comes to the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you got a problem with Chief or something like that, then you come to us, you know? But I mean, other than that, the reports are great. Reports are very good. They're very informative and stuff like that, Tommy. I mean, I would like some reports and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah, the way I see our responsibility is we manage the chief, right? And we put our trust in him and to manage the district employees. So I think anything related to the chief would come to us, and then monthly reports would help keep us informed. I think this would be helpful. Does that
Absolutely.
Is that how it works, Cynthia, in other places? Like how should we approach that?
Well, like, for example, I mean, another municipality, probably another board-driven industry or a client is at like a municipality. We don't report necessarily to the chief of PD, nor the town clerk nor the maintenance director, or we go to the board, right? The mayor will get us involved, but we don't necessarily report to the mayor, so to speak. We do a lot through the mayor because of the chain of command, but the board made it very clear that we don't fall under their chain of command. We fall under the board's chain of command. Okay, so that's just for to keep that control, and that there is no favoritism. There's no control from. It wasn't on mine. I promise you that.
I just heard somebody say, "Shut up."
It was towards the pet. Forgive me.
So I just want to make sure that that's again an understanding for you board members, that if there's something that needs to be if there's a role, and Cindy, you can help me with this, if we've done something where let's say the mayor says, no, I'm not going to do that, we go. I know we had an incident where this person posted something that was inappropriate, and we had to go to the board and tell the board, this is a recommendation, what we got to do going forward, because this person was not listening to our recommendation. And so the board then said, we have to go based on a human resource recommendation. And although that person was still fighting and not agreeing with that, we had to go directly to the board and say, this is how it should be done. It's up to the board to decide. So the board voted and followed our direction. And I think that would be just something that may present itself. I don't think we've ever had that, Chief, but it may present itself.
I'm going to give you an example, and I think this will clear up the issue here. So let's say right now I'm the one that controls who puts an item on the agenda, right? So let's say that you feel that I have a problem, that I disagree with you. I think the logical step for you all as the human resources is for you to get with the board president to put the agenda item, because I cannot supersede him, okay, or any of the board members, but it should go to him, and then he's gonna say, put this agenda item, done deal. And that way you're all covered to make sure that it gets on there. This goes for anybody.
And I do want to kind of reiterate a little bit on what Chief was saying, and Tommy as well. If it's day to day, right, we have to let Chief know, right? Because he has to be in the loop, because he's the one that's handling the day-to-day stuff, right? He has to determine at some point how severe, with our recommendation, of course, right? If it's something extremely severe that we know the final decision has to come from the board, then together, right, we work on that recommendation, and usually we should be on the same page, right? And now if there's discrepancy or disparity on the route or the route we should take, then naturally would come to the president, right, and say, hey, these are the risks that maybe Chief is not in accordance with, but we're just giving you the heads up that this was our recommendation. And again, that gives both of you, or the board and the Chief, the opportunity to discuss with all the cards on the table per se. So, but we would have to include Chief in all the day-to-day stuff, because he's the one presently there.
Right. And that's operational. But the real question was, whose chain of command do we fall on? And but again, if it's something that is unclear at the moment, or then to Commissioner Diaz's point, it's kind of, it depends, I guess, on the situation.
I think if it's employee matter, I'd handle it here. Now, if it gets to the point where the district might be in a liability, it goes to the board.
I think the question you're asking, Tommy, is, do you work with Chief or for Chief?
Correct.
I would say for and with, if I'm not mistaken.
Can't do both. When there's two people in the room, someone's in charge.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for Tommy to report. You report to the board, but we direct you to work with Chief on operations and day-to-day activities, right?
I think it should be Chief. Chief is the one that's there. We're not there all the time. We don't see everything that happens. I have to respectfully disagree. And I also feel like that's undercutting his authority. within the ESD itself. And so I think it should go to chief and then to us. But I think if it's who do you work with or for, I think it's for, because he is the face of the ESD. He is the one that runs the ESD. We're not. I know. You know, there's some commissioners here. You spend a lot more time than I do there, but even the time you spend there doesn't accumulate or even get close to what Roger puts in. So
Exactly.
I think we need to support Roger on this. I think he has to have our back and work for Roger. And then if it's something huge in that sense, then we'll step in, or you'll meet with President Santana and let him know, and then he can bring it to us. That's how I think it should go. I think that's the proper way to move forward.
No, and I agree, Rick. I just saying, I know that was the hard question out there. I think we're trying to work our way around the hard question versus what's the question on the table. So I agree. Roger's in charge. You know what I'm saying? You know, he runs it every day. Does a damn good job. But I think the hard question out there was that question. And how do we address that? And then I think we owe Tommy an answer. Wherever we don't owe the easy answer. We owe the hard answer. I think, you know, and I believe, and I agree with you on that.
Well, Commissioners, the most important problem right here, right now, is item number 10, discuss and take action on the proposed contract with Kano HR. I think we went a little bit off topic. You have the contract in front of you. Which option would you like to go with, and are you okay with it? And would you?
I want to go with any option that keeps Brenda and Cynthia on the team. I know who does the work.
Well, this is just a proposal. I don't have the contract ready. That will be drafted based on what option you choose, so that I can send it to you.
When we spoke to Tommy, he said we can start with option 2, and over time we can choose to go back to option 1. So I do think for now we should. I make a motion to start with option 2, and you know, with the option of moving back to option 1.
I second.
I agree. Yep.
I have a motion by Commissioner Santana, second by Commissioner Butler. Commissioner Diaz?
Aye.
Commissioner Butler?
Aye.
Commissioner Santana?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes?
Aye.
Commissioner Avalos?
Aye.
Motion carries. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you very much.
I even started getting a temperature here.
Yeah, don't say that, Chief. That's not
I'm
tonight.
gonna go give me a rapid test by myself right now. Commissioners, going back to the regular agenda. Item number 7, discussion and report by Chief Esparza. Commissioners, I put a couple of points that I wanted to go over. As you all aware, Chief Treviso resigned as the FRO. I will be submitting the paperwork for the Texas Department of Health, naming Diego Sariana as the new FRO. He was the assistant to Chief Treviso, and that's one of the people that he recommended as well. I did have a talk with Chief Sariana, and he is willing to take on this new task. He has been working already on a couple of the issues that were left unattended, and we will be looking at this, and I will, once all this happens, then we will ratify some of the changes that were made to the first responder organization that were left unattended. As part of that, we did apply to become a vaccination site, and apparently only half the application was filled out. So he's handling the rest of the application. So in the next week or two, we should have our answer as to if we are a vaccination site or not. That's one of the things the county did ask me if we were willing to do that. We're going to try. That just brings more vaccinations to the county of El Paso if we become a vaccination site. Item number 2, radios have been reprogrammed to the frequencies the city was paying for. We do have an agenda item here because we are finding out that some departments have lost some of these radios, and I want to caution you because I think some of these radios were in upwards with upgrades and all that of $7,000. So we have an agenda item to discuss what to do with that. but most of the radios were already located with the exception of about 10. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to handle that. The recourse will be from you as the board to each department that can't find those, because that is a lot of money. We'll discuss that a little bit more when we get to that agenda item. As for the vehicles that we discussed earlier, we do have a lot of the money in the account still, so that's why, as Mr. Teo said, we did have a excess of revenues. However, that should be leaving here soon because they can't bill us until the vehicles are on the way to us. So as I was told, our vehicles were supposed to have been delivered this week, but as you all know, Austin is freezing. They're rolling powers. So I don't think that our 10 to 12 vehicles are rolling out anytime soon out of Austin. So it might be a week or two before we start seeing those vehicles. Item number 4, Socorro Fire Stations now has natural gas. I'm happy to announce that. After all this time, we finally got everything connected. The installation is 90% complete, so we are seeing a difference in the heating of that station. So after 20 years of not having insulation in that facility, it just feels much, much better. So we're looking forward to not have that big $4,000 monthly bill for propane. Number 5, the station at Las Colonias has running water now. We are waiting for this weather to clear up so we can begin the construction of the new one. As Theo mentioned, some of that is a part of the money that we have there that we budgeted for. So again, some of that money will be leaving as soon as as per the contract. Number 6, we started the cycle for the new budget. I did give all the staff their job duties for this budget. Mariana, excellent job. I saw all your numbers for the outstanding debt to the district so that we can see what else we're going to do with this budget and try to prepare it for you all to review and be a little bit early. Only 2 chiefs submitted for special projects, West Valley and Montana Vista. So with that said, we're already getting quotes to see if we can do a new station at Montana Vista, the other half of the one that's piecemealed. We had meetings with the chief. We had meetings with the contractor to give us an estimated budgetary number. So we'll go from there. And we've also, I don't know if you all keep up with our Facebook, we have started the fit testing for the new SCBAs. They are here. We're just waiting for them to be flow tested. In accordance to NFPA, we are testing for N95 masks. So our next stop tomorrow is Montana Vista. We will be there 3 days in a row, then Socorro, then so on and so on until we get all these. In the next couple of weeks, we should have these air packs flow tested, and then we will be out there delivering. Any questions, commissioners?
None.
One more thing that I forgot at last minute. We did get approved the $225,000 of CARES money. After all this review, it wasn't on that audit because we didn't receive it and we didn't know if we were going to receive it. So after all the documentation and questions that I had to answer for the county auditor's office, we did get approved for it. So it should be here. I'm guessing if Mariana hasn't received it this week, it's going to be mailed. So once that happens, the volunteers, as your approval, will be receiving a check for $800. The ones that did get COVID, we couldn't cut the checks until we had the money on hand. So from the phone call I got, Mariana, you have not received that check yet? So as soon as it gets here and we have the check on hand?
Today, there was no check yet.
So we will be cutting those checks out.
Hey, Roger, how many are we talking about? Is that for paid staff, volunteers, everybody?
No, the paid staff already got paid. They got paid through us. We're talking about the volunteers that the chiefs did submit, and I think we only had like 10, maybe 15 people. So those are the ones. But we are going to have a little bit of surplus in case we do the vaccination site for us to be able to pay extra overtime for our staff to be here vaccinating people.
Didn't we talk about Chief giving, was it just the volunteers who got COVID, or I thought it was those who were responding to COVID calls?
No, just the volunteers, they tested positive for COVID.
They lost time at work, at their own work. due to COVID that they contracted on while volunteering.
So
Please explain
after, just another little touch on that, just after we had all that discussion and our insurance was denying care for those people that got COVID because they didn't want to approve it because they didn't know if they got it here, even though that we're more prevalent to getting COVID in our line of work. We had a long talk with VFIS. They had me resubmit some of these. They're going out for bat. The only thing that they said is, look, we can't, you guys have already paid and that cannot change. So I was okay. According to VFIS, it's in our best interest to fight it, even if we lose, because if one of these firefighters had a long-term health care need, it would be covered, versus if we didn't fight it and they didn't have a way to sustain themselves, they wouldn't be covered. So we're fighting a couple of them right now, and we are still yet to hear back if they're going to approve it or not. But VFIS is now involved, as they're our carrier, and they're going out for bat for us. So we'll see what happens, because if any of the guys that got COVID have long-term needs, they should be covered. All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
No problem. Any other questions?
None.
Item number 7, discussion report by Chief Esparza, informational purposes only. Item number 8, discuss and take action on expenditures exceeding $2,000, coming sales and service for $3,258. Commissioners, bump radar 1 broke down. I was actually on the road test with Chief Adler. He called it there was a problem, and obviously we broke down in the middle of the road, so we had to have that truck towed. Fast forward to now, we're in excess of $4,000. The first ticket came out at $3,258, but the other parts had not been billed, so that's why you'll see another one next month for more money. The truck is up and running. Glad to say that, so we should be going up to sale. I'd like a motion for approval of this expense.
Motion to approve.
Motion.
I have a motion by Santana, second by Barnes.
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Butler,
Aye.
Commissioner Santana,
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
and Commissioner Avalos.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 11, discussion and action on all missing and portable radios issued to all fire departments commissioners. As I know right now, I believe San Elizario is missing 1. They're still looking for it. Montana Vista is missing 1. Socorro, last we checked, it was still missing about 4 radios. So we're trying to figure out who has these radios. Apparently, during the shuffle of chiefs, somebody didn't take control of what assets were where. And we just got some that were turned over to Chief Adler while he was working his part-time, because they saw him there and they were given to him. So we were able to collect 2 from Sanelli and put back into our inventory. However, there will be probably some that will never be recovered. And these radios are in excess of $7,000 now if we had to replace. So eventually it will be a problem. And I don't know if this is something you want to ponder on till next meeting, and we can give you the exact count. What's that?
Do we have hand receipts who had those radios?
The chief, some of them did not give. As a matter of fact, the last chief that was in charge of the radios for San Elizario signed them all out himself and never had any of the volunteers sign them out. So yeah.
It goes to that hand receipt holder then, correct?
So this is one of the things that we're either going to send the chiefs, as that's their department, they should be sending a certified letter to these individuals that they need to turn in all these radios, or they could be prosecuted for.
We're not prosecuted, but charged.
Charged. Yes,
yeah,
charged.
Financially.
Yes.
Brenda, what do you think? Cynthia, see what I'm talking about?
I think she fell asleep.
Brenda, he's talking about you.
Should I try to get some HR support?
Okay. I didn't hear what he said.
So right now, we do have the chiefs looking for them and try to accumulate them, but if there is none, I guess we'll put the agenda item to give you the exact numbers and how we plan to fix this issue.
Agree.
So item number 11, informational purposes only.
Hey, Roger. Hey, I
Yes,
just
sir.
want to let everyone know, I don't want to speak out of turn, but check your emails. Chief Reyes did send us all a note apologizing for his absence.
Yes, I saw it. I saw it come in.
Okay.
Commissioners, I would like a motion to delete item number 14.
Motion.
Second.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Butler,
Aye.
Commissioner Santana,
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
and Commissioner Avalos.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 15, discuss and approve next meeting to take place on
March 16.
March 16th at 6 p.m. Everybody good with that date?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a motion?
Motion.
Sorry, that was Mr. Diaz.
Yes.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Butler,
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
and Commissioner Avalos.
Yes, aye.
Motion carries. Adjournment at 8:56 p.m.
Yes.
God.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
All right, guys, be safe out there.
Everybody.
Good night.
Tommy, send us that contract so we can have Commissioner. I lost your name, Commissioner Santana. Commissioner Santana, sign it.
Definitely. I'll work on it.
I just want to go on record. Bye, Brenda. Bye, Cynthia. Tommy. Whatever. You know what I'm saying? You won't come to our Christmas party?